Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is a special meeting of the Board of Education. I would ask that you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Kelly, tonight we're going to do this. I don't know if that's going to work. Okay, maybe not. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. By doing that, putting the flag there, Mr. Kelly did not have to look at my belly. So
it's always a highlight.
That was for you, Joe. Before we get going, just a couple of things. We're meeting virtually. This is still being done pursuant to the governor's order, Executive Order 7B. All of our meetings are recorded. They're being posted on our YouTube page. Thank you for following us. Big hit. We've yet to monetize it. Couple things to point out. The agenda for our meeting is on our board docs website. You can get there by going to greenwichschools.org, clicking on the Board of Education, scrolling down to the blue meetings minutes box. Once you are there, it'll take you to board docs. You can click on tonight's meeting and you can see the agenda. This is a special business meeting, so we'll be taking public comments. We've got a couple of speakers signed up. In addition, members of the community who didn't sign up can still reach out to the board, send an email to all of the 8 board members by sending to a single email address. That's boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. Again, it's boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. Meeting tonight is going to consist of discussion by and among the superintendent, board members, her team, and I don't know that we have any external guests tonight, so that's great. I'm going to ask people to please stay muted when they're not speaking. Ask people to state their name unless I've already called on them, and we'll be using the raise the hand function so I can call on people in the order that they've requested. Ask board members to try to keep their comments concise, and for any voting, we'll be doing that by roll call. So listen for your name. All right. With that, can I get a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
I'll make a motion to move the meeting agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Kelly is our second. All right. I'm going to take a quick roll call vote. Bernstein, yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
No.
Olson?
Yes.
And Cher. I'm not sure if Peter's on. That passes. Peter, are you there? You are? Great.
Yes. Yes.
All right. You're a yes. Thank you. So that passes 7-1. And nice COVID beard, Peter.
Mm.
All right. With that, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Ms. Hirsch, is there a second? Ms. Stowe. All right. We'll take a quick roll call vote on approving the consent agenda. Bernstein is a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
And Cher.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes 8-0. Next, we're bringing back student and staff recognition. So it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Nadell.
Thank you very much. I didn't know we were the first of the year, so I especially am honored. Thank you everyone for this opportunity to recognize select Greenwich High School seniors who have earned awards through programs sponsored by the College Board this school year. We're grateful to these students for their hard work, their educational achievements. All of this brings positive recognition to themselves, their families, and to our town. Normally, when we are in person at board meetings, I ask you all to hold your applause, but since all of our families are at home, you can shout, you can whistle, you can clap to your heart's content when your child's name is called. The first group of students whose names I'm going to read have been named College Board National Recognition Program Scholars. These seniors are Gabriela Mendoza, Hala Clausi, Marcelo Gigliani Alcantarilla, Olivia McClammy, Bruno Cordova, Austin Benison, Juan Diaz de Bonilla, Julia Lucy, Charles Ellis. So congratulations to these scholars. The second group of students have been named commended students in the National Merit Scholarship Program. Austin Bennison, Lillian Bierke, Trent Boone, Mark Chen, Grace Collier, Madeline Cook, Charlie Decker, Peter Feenstra, Lena Jan, David Katz, Jaywoo Cook, Dylan Maloney, Gabriela Mendoza, Gabriela Meyerhoff, Dylan Minnie, Madeline Park, Uma Penskar, Sophia Pronina, Mark Razanow, Caroline Reagan, James Rinello, Hadley Rosenberg, Selden Salage, Benjamin Shinto, Olivia Schnorr, Lena Takor, Catherine Tiberts, Austin Towell, John Trahanis, Natalie Williams, Joshua Winston, Alexander Yi, Colin Ying, Andrew Zhang, William Zhang, and Tiffany Zheng. The third group of students whose names I will read have been named semifinalists in the National Merit Scholarship Competition. These seniors have all submitted applications for finalist status, and we will hear about those results a little bit later in the spring. Our semifinalists are Meredith Blanchard, Chelsea Cleary, Claire Dobbins, Samuel Florin, George Gilfond, Joseph Hirsch, Anjali Kishore, Skylar McDonald, Genevieve McQuillan, Wyatt Radzin, Irish Shee, Artemis Shung, and Colin Speaker. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to all of our student scholars. Great work to all of you. Next up, we've got the fall All-State student athletes, Mr. Mayo and Mr. Lundeen.
I just wanted to come on and thank Gus and his entire athletic staff for all the obstacles they had to overcome this fall to get these athletes on the field and get them to the point where they were winning awards. And our teams this year were really, really good. And unfortunately, there were no state championships or playoffs, because I think we would have had 4 or 5 championship teams this year. So, but they did their best, they worked hard, they overcame obstacles, and that's what we expect of our students. So Mr. Lundeen, our athletic director, can you please introduce our all-state student athletes?
Yes, my pleasure, Mr. Mayo, and thank you and good evening, everyone. Even with a very challenging fall, we still had athletes, teams, and coachings competing and achieving at the highest levels. The Cardinals won FCIAC regional championships in girls cross country, girls field hockey, boys soccer, girls swimming and diving, and girls volleyball. We also had some great individual accomplishments. Please allow me to introduce the following athletes that were named to the all-state teams. In girls swimming and diving, Annie Bingle, Sammy Ennis, Peyton Foster, Sabrina Hobart, Sydney G, Katarina Lee, Victoria Liu, Megan Lynch, Isabella Malco, Ismay Merrill, Ellie Scharf, and Sophia Sitchik. In field hockey, Charlotte Gans, Georgia Pasteur, and Isabella Latuado were named All-State. Girls cross country, Mari Noble. Boys soccer, Santiago Borrego and Andrew Lowett. And in girls volleyball, Lily Salibi. Please join me in offering congratulations for all their outstanding accomplishments. And I would also like to take a moment to thank all of our fall athletes. With the help of our custodians keeping our facilities clean and our nurses and trainers helping monitor COVID-19, our kids were extremely conscientious in maintaining health and safety guidelines. It wasn't easy, but they made it a priority to stay safe. And I can't tell you how proud I really am of them. They were terrific. So I think you guys are awfully proud of them as well. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share their accomplishments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a shout out to all of our student athletes. It's been a rough year. We completely understand. So thank you for going above and beyond, everyone. Next up would be the I Love My Librarian Award winner, Miss Ricci.
Hi there, good evening. This evening I'm excited and proud to be here to introduce ISD's fabulous media specialist, Jane Martellino. Jane was recently named one of the winners of the I Love My Librarian Award by the American Library Association. She was one of just 10 recipients of the award in the country and was chosen among almost 1,900 nominations. Several staff members and I, along with several members of our parent community, enthusiastically shared our reasons in her nomination packet as to why we thought Jane was worthy of this recognition. One quote from her nominators summarizes our feelings. Jane's brilliant mind literally never stops, and everyone at ISD benefits from her enthusiasm, intelligence, and incomparable creative energy. Her passion for books is so palpable, so contagious, that you simply have to be a part of it. Thank you for allowing me to publicly recognize Mrs. Martellino this evening and to share the honor of congratulating her for this well-deserved award. She is a librarian who is literally and rightfully loved and appreciated by all. Congratulations, Jane.
Yes, let me echo the congratulations. And Jane, we could probably all use some book recommendations, maybe something upbeat. With that, we're going to move on to our public hearing. First up would be our GHS student government comments. So Mark and Meredith, take it away.
Meredith.
Hello, sorry for the brief delay. Hello to all the members of the board and to the people observing the meeting tonight. My name is Meredith Blanchard and I'm the GHS Senior Class President. I wanted to thank you all again for graciously devoting time to student voices at each meeting. As the third quarter begins, we have some updates on how things are doing at the high school. The spring is hurtling toward us faster than we think, and so the planning of spring events has begun. We are brainstorming ways to make events like prom and SRO happen in the fullest yet safest capacities possible. It's an exciting prospect because we have a lot of creative space to reimagine those events. For instance, maybe SRO this year will incorporate food trucks and recorded skits. It's possible that prom will be in shifts instead of all at once. However, we are treating the changed event requirements like an opportunity. SRO participation has been down in past years, so maybe this is the year to make changes that will accommodate a changed student culture and start a new tradition. Hopefully by the time I speak next month, we will have a fuller idea of what those events will look like. For a more current update on the student body, it seems that most everyone is relieved about the decision to cancel midterms. This year, working through digital learning has weighed on everyone, and midterms would have definitely contributed an additional stress to student life. We are grateful that the administration recognized this and not only got rid of midterms this year, but also replaced them with reflective, stress-reducing social emotional learning days. I believe that students will get a lot out of those days. As always, we appreciate you and other members of the board, administration, and faculty going above and beyond to make student life as enjoyable as possible. I'll now turn the mic over to our student body president, Mark Chen.
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Jones, members of the board, cabinet, and meeting attendees. My name is Mark Chen, student body president at Greenwich High School. I hope everyone had a restful break as we moved into the new year. GHS student government is currently gearing up for the start of the second semester, and we are excited for the possibilities of the future. Last year, Student Government's Executive Committee sent out a mid-year feedback survey which provided invaluable insight into student government representative engagement and feedback about how student government could improve. We will be absolutely doing the same thing this year. And as I reflect upon the meetings we've had with student government as a whole and with our executive committee, alongside Dr. Jones, Mr. Bernstein, Mr. Mayo, Ms. Talata, and most recently, Ms. Stowe, I'm so grateful for the opportunities available to GHS's student government. In particular, I'd like to thank Dr. Jones for making the time out of her very busy schedule to meet with us once a month, engaging with our feedback and sharing updates. At our last Board of Ed meeting, I mentioned how we just had a very successful conclusion to our PPE drive, and successful it was. We donated 5 large boxes full of PPE to Greenwich Hospital, which included over 800 masks in just one box alone. This was all thanks to Hadley Rosenberg, our VP of Community Service, who organized this tremendous drive. And as my peers and I look to the rest of the school year, we are certainly looking forward to more asynchronous Wednesdays. The benefits of a break and asynchronous activities in general cannot be understated, even if you are still logged on to the Meet but allowed to camera off and work independently for a short while. And as we approach February, we are also planning on doing some sort of virtual Candygram for Valentine's Day, where students can send positive and uplifting messages to each other. We will, of course, be the intermediary between students to make sure everything goes smoothly. We also see this as an excellent opportunity to engage remote students. And lastly, right before our holiday break, student government representatives put together a thank you video for teachers, and I've heard that there was great feedback. I look forward to a promising 2021, and I hope to share many more exciting projects, updates, and thoughts with you all. Thank you for your time tonight. It is always a pleasure.
All right, thank you so much, Meredith and Mark. Appreciate the updates and the kind words. Next up will be the GEA comments. Carol Sutton.
Okay, I believe I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Michael, can you restart the timer for Carol? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, board members, Dr. Jones, cabinet, and members of the Greenwich Public School community on Zoom. My name is Carol Sutton, and I'm honored to represent 900 members of the Greenwich Education Association. Congratulations to this evening's student honorees, and especially to our own Jane Martellino for her extraordinary work as librarian at ISD. GEA had a busy run-up to the end of 2020. This year, our teachers, administrators, and staff contributed over $16,000 to our annual Holiday Bear project to provide holiday cheer to 290 students across the district. That's the most ever. GEA members also made substantial contributions to community centers, neighbor to neighbor, filling in the blanks, and the Boys and Girls Club. If there was ever a year to give extra, this was it, and we did. And we're also giving extra in the classroom. As I've said at previous meetings, teachers are working harder than ever. Whether in person, remotely, or hybrid, everything takes longer during a pandemic. Creating a meaningful new normal requires constant reworking and revamping of lessons, and significantly more emails to students, parents, and colleagues, and yet no additional time has been added to the day. Teachers cannot work optimally for their students if they're stretched to the limit. This is why GEA has been working with Dr. Jones on adding early release days for teachers so they can get the job done. Many districts, including Darien, Wilton, Easton, have prioritized teacher preparation, planning, and professional development and designated an early release every week for these purposes. It is not too late for Greenwich to recognize the merit of early release days as part of a flexible and realistic approach to pandemic education. We'd also appreciate consideration of remote days after February break so that families and teachers can be tested before returning to school. This evening, we're looking forward to the Hamilton Avenue STEAM report with the understanding that some of the plans that will be presented last January may have been lost to COVID. We hope to hear that the district has chosen consistency rather than a new approach. Innovation will not attract without results, and results follow when the faculty gets to practice something over time, not when they're asked to pivot with each new superintendent or principal. The Hamilton Avenue School community has been on a roller coaster of initiatives for a decade or more. They need consistency and a laser focus on reading and writing skills that every student needs to succeed. We're also interested in hearing the ALP report. It's encouraging to see the recommendation for an enhanced role for teachers in the ALP placement process because teachers regularly observe what assessments cannot measure and what many may not be evident at home. Moreover, any and all efforts to identify students early and diversify ALP will be appreciated. Otherwise, GHS will continue to be a segregated school where outside of PE and health and a small handful of electives, students are not in classes that reflect the diversity of our town and our region. Greenwich needs to do better to prepare the next generation for its future. Finally, and this is the last point, at the midpoint of the year, GEA would like to see all students reaffirm their commitment to digital citizenship so that remote learning is safe for all. Thank you and have a great meeting.
Thank you very much, Carol. All right, next up is the PTA Council comments. Brian Paldunas.
I really talk
That-
fast.
Carol, I'm not sure if you're muted, so you may want to mute yourself. And Brian, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good evening. Happy New Year. I am Brian Peldunas, President of PTA Council, representing the 15 school PTAs and the families of all of their members. Congratulations to all the honorees this evening. First off, we encourage all parents to join the BET Budget Committee public hearing next Tuesday at 7 p.m. to express your opinions on the proposed budget or to email the committee members. Some follow-up points. We strongly support GPSs having the resources necessary for cybersecurity. Regarding technology, we note that the GHS purchased 5 laptops to support a pilot being conducted by the math department to evaluate higher power Chromebooks. We support immediate steps to alleviate Chromebook issues, particularly where students require 2 devices to fully participate. The steering committee for the special education audit with 2 parent members continues to meet weekly. We look forward to the progress update this evening. On agenda items, we also look forward to the strategic plan update, as this plan will set the direction for our district going forward. Parents and PTA Council are looking forward to participating in the process. PTA Council fully supports student participation in the Greenwich Together survey so that we can be better informed about the issues facing our families and our students. Our primary focus this evening is on the ALP program report. We would like to make 3 specific points. First, we welcome the revelations from this report and the October ALP review regarding issues with the placement process. We hope the Board of Education will engage in brisk discussions on the many facets of this process so as to provide clear guidance to the administration on revisions to the placement process and the need for subsequent fidelity to that process. Second, as expected, the report shows underrepresentation in ALP and advanced learning participation across gender, race, ethnicity, and economic status. This applies to Hispanic and low SES students across just about every advanced class, to Black students in secondary math and female students in elementary math, to male students in AP English. Each of these issues grows from different causes and have different impacts. The recommended focus on identifying and providing enhanced learning opportunities is welcome, but we believe in developing the remedies to this situation. The district needs to understand the root causes. If you believe, as we do, that this is a lost opportunity to educate every student to their fullest potential, then there needs to be focus, action, funding, and accountability. This focused plan would benefit all students, not just advanced students. Third, digging deeper into the numbers highlights the need for well-reasoned program or curriculum progressions for math at the elementary level if we ever plan to reach our 75% target. The fact is that about 45% of our students are making the single jump from 5th grade to 7th grade without adequate preparation. The recommendation in the report to establish a talent pool for those students on the cusp of ALP needs to be expanded. The advanced learning team, the STEM team need to work together to establish pathways, likely beginning as early as 3rd or 4th grade, that go beyond the state standards for those students likely to make the single or double jump. Finally, we noted several errors or distortions in the data and request that an updated report be posted to avoid future issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Sorry about the timer. I'm not sure what, we've got technical challenges on a PowerPoint timer.
I just saw a flashing out the corner of my eye, so I ignored it.
Appreciate that. All right, next up are our community comments. We've got 4 speakers signed up tonight. They're all regulars, but I'll remind them they each have 3 minutes, and hopefully our timer will be working. First up, we've got Carolyn Peterson.
Unmute. I'm there. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hello. Hello again. You may remember me by now, as I have spoken numerous times in front of you. My name is Carolyn Peterson. I'm here again to show support for the much needed renovation of Old Greenwich School. I'm not sure how many times I've spoken on behalf of this initiative, but I know I have restated my message many times. I want to get your attention tonight on behalf of Old Greenwich School. I will then work to get the attention of the BET next week. I have volunteered at the school for 8 years and am now the PTA president. I also sit on the OGS Feasibility Study Committee. However, I speak tonight as a parent. My son Henry is a 5th grader, and this will be our last year at the school. I hope that I can say goodbye in June knowing I did all I could to advocate for this renovation. This project is crucial to the Old Greenwich School community, the Old Greenwich community, as well as the greater Greenwich community. I appreciate that there are a lot of factors and layers in this decision-making process. I also know that the Feasibility Study Committee has worked diligently to modify the plan so that it better fits into our town's overall strategy. I strongly believe that the renovation of Old Greenwich School should be in that strategy. We speak of equity across the districts. Old Greenwich School disenfranchises any student, teacher, parent, or visitor who has a physical disability. We need to make this a priority and fix this inequity. I know there are many important projects that are proposed and that every advocate believes that their project is the most important. This project is important. It is important to ensure that any student, including those with physical disabilities, can attend Old Greenwich School. The budget has been brought into line. It is a simple decision about whether or not you want to make this a priority. Please ask yourselves, what message do you want to send to the Old Greenwich School community with your decision? Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker is Terry LaMancha.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Superintendent Jones, and Board of Education members. I am Terry LaMantia, and Steph Cowie and I are currently the co-presidents at Greenwich High School. We would also like to congratulate the Greenwich High School honorees this evening. We are all encouraged by the beginning of winter sports. While we know there is no promise about the future, we are thankful for this opportunity for our students. With respect to the 2021-2022 Board of Education budget, we encourage the BET to support the operating and capital budgets as presented by Dr. Jones. We would like to personally thank Dr. Jones and her team for always working tirelessly throughout the year to provide our children, faculty, and staff a safe place to learn and to work. Budget season seems to be a very contentious time for everyone. We are hopeful that cooler minds will prevail and make the right educational decisions for our students as we move forward through the pandemic. Technology and textbooks continue to be a priority at Greenwich High School. As technology needs continue to increase, we believe this is a very important part of the 2021-2022 operating budget. Education delivery is evolving, and our faculty and students deserve cutting-edge technologies to meet these needs. While some feel the need for textbooks are obsolete, the importance of textbooks cannot be understated. Simply, students cannot do everything on their devices. Textbook investments have been minimal in the last 3 years. This budget decision needs to change for the 2021-2022 school year. On a positive note, we are pleased that both the Cardinal Stadium and the Greenwich High School front entryway projects are underway. We hope that the full completion of all phases of these projects continue to be a top priority for our district. As we believe that our community will be in a better place with coronavirus in June, we remain hopeful that our seniors can experience a normal graduation ceremony that will be permissible under the health guidelines. We thank you all for your never-ending support and for your consideration of all these matters during these challenging times. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Emily Trotman. All right, do we have Emily?
Hi.
Hi there, can hear you.
Hi. Okay, great. Good evening, Dr. Jones, board members, and meeting attendees. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your dedication to our community. Thank you for all the hard work that you do, board members, on behalf of our children. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for everything you're doing on behalf of our community. And thank you to our teachers and administrators who are showing up every day. You are my frontline heroes, and I'm very grateful for you. My name is Emily Trotman. I have one Greenwich High School graduate and a daughter in middle school. I'm an experienced teacher and parent coach. In short, I help parents stay sane while raising complex kids. As a parent coach, I am often asked to speak with parents at Greenwich Public Schools to engage on topics around parenting. How to manage emotions and worry is always a topic of great concern. Being able to manage triggers and regulate emotion is key to our students' success in learning. Emotions matter, and never has it been more important to address the social and emotional health of our schools, our teachers, our staff, our children, and our families. We must put in measures to protect and nurture the whole child, mind, body, and emotions. Even before the pandemic, parents were stretched. Before the pandemic, 1 in 3 children were experiencing some form of anxiety before the age of 18. Can you imagine what that number is today? What it will be tomorrow? A comprehensive social emotional curriculum will provide teachers, staff, and kids the research-based strategies in emotional regulation. The Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence offers an amazing program called Ruler, which is for K through 12. Why do emotions matter so much? I'll give you 4 really good reasons that affect learning: attention, memory, learning, decision-making. These are all related to executive function, and they're really, really important for kids' success in school. What makes Ruler compelling to me as a parent coach is the family component. It gives schools innovative approaches to engage families. It teaches parents how to be patient, responsive, and kind while holding children to a high standard. And I think I would like a little bit of that myself right now, learning how to be more patient and responsive. So let's hope that individual schools, PTAs, overworked social workers, and volunteers such as myself, let's hope that we don't leave our kids' social and emotional health to well-meaning individuals. Let's, as a district, adopt a comprehensive social and emotional curriculum to respond to this current crisis. Schools should not be left on their own to figure out how to move forward. Let's start as a district educating the whole child, mind, body, and emotions too. Let's put social emotional learning at the top of our agenda for the whole district. If you want to reach out to me, please find me at emilytrotman.com, Trotman, or find the Ruler program. It's all over, but the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. So any thoughts or comments or ideas from anybody listening, I'd be happy to explore this with you. Thank you again, everybody. And here's to our teachers.
All right, thank you so much. All right, the last speaker tonight is Frances Nobe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Frances, can hear you.
Good evening, this is Frances Nobe, PTAC Remote Schools Special Committee Co-Chair. Happy New Year and welcome to 2021. To start, sincere thanks to GPS for a very successful all-district remote school week. Kudos to the teachers, kudos to the students, kudos to the parents who seamlessly supported remote learning. We full-time remote learners were delighted so many in the district were able to share our overall positive experiences. And well, also our 3 challenge areas. 1, and you heard Brian mentioned it earlier, the tech reality that 2 internet-enabled devices are really needed to complete secondary school remote learning. The current GPS Chromebook is not powerful enough. 2, and you heard this from Mark Chen, continued issues with Zoom fatigue, especially too much on-screen work. 3, extreme anxiety and frustration caused daily when critical instructions are constantly shared seconds into class with students not yet connected and then totally lost. We know that GPS is well aware of these issues, especially the Chromebook issues, and we look forward to tech and instructional improvements soon. Also, we'd like to share 3 pieces of news. Tomorrow, Friday, January 22nd at 10 o'clock, PTAC Remote Schools will host our very first parent meeting for the largest elementary school in the district. All remote school parents, especially grades K to 8, are invited to join our virtual meeting with GPS's Mr. D'Amico and team. Dr. Jones will also pop in to say hello. Access details can be found on the GPS website in the community calendar. Next week, Friday, January 29th at 1:15, PTAC Remote Schools welcomes performers Hip Hop Fundamentals to share the life and history of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in song and dance. This virtual performance and 3 more monthly performances have been generously funded by the Greenwich Alliance for Education. And lastly, as Emily also mentioned just before me, PTAC Remote Schools is very thankful to GPS school psychologist Dr. Fabian Boy, who has agreed to offer 2 sessions especially for remote school families to address, confront, and bounce back from tech tears, anxiety, anger, and other worries. Remote school is new and sometimes stressful, but we will come out of this experience stronger, more resilient, and extremely tech savvy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That concludes our community comments and public hearing, and we are going to move on to our monthly reports, starting with the superintendent. Dr.
Thank you,
Jones.
Chair Bernstein. I do have a couple of items tonight. First of all, I want to start with congratulations to all of those who were recognized tonight. Just outstanding. And I have to say, I wasn't surprised Jane, won from across the country. I have fallen in love with her videos that she started creating last spring, I believe, during remote. And she actually has her dog featured in many of them. And the dog talks and reads stories to children. And it's just really, truly amazing. So congratulations to all of those who are recognized. I want to just mention we are in the middle of STAR and link it some of those assessments. And so I know parents are aware of that. We've found that these are great instructional tools to make sure that we know what that rate of learning is for our students as we go through the year. Also, just a reminder that there is an open email for PCG, the consultant who is conducting our special education survey, our special education study all year. And that email will stay open through March 31st. So anybody that wants to provide input can do that. And you can watch for that. We generally put it in our newsletter every Friday if you can't find the link. Also, I know Gus mentioned that we have started athletics. Athletics is starting with our low and moderate sports, much like it did in the fall, and that it's new for us. And just as a reminder, one of the things that really became challenging in the fall with sports, it wasn't school sports. Our coaches and our players did a fabulous job wearing a mask, following the mitigation strategies. It really was the independent sports where we were challenged, and they have changed their approach to that, where they're asking those independent sports to also follow the mitigation strategies. So we're really hopeful that that's going to be very helpful for us going through spring sports. We did have a planning and zoning meeting for Cardinal Stadium last night and had that a unanimous vote for 1B. So just thanks to all the people that have served on that committee and will continue to serve. We're so happy to have that project moving forward. We also have next week a really important meeting on a public hearing for fields 3, 4, and 5. And those of you who have lived in town for a long time know soil remediation at the high school. This is quite an intensive project, and there is a public hearing where DEEP and EPA will be there. Again, that's Wednesday at 6 o'clock. They want to hear public comment in support of redoing these fields, getting the remediation done. And this is a really important project because if we don't stay on time and be able to get our fields done, they will reach kind of that end of life as well. So we need your support on that. We also are looking forward to the vaccine. That's a big discussion item, obviously, for everybody. But for educators, we are waiting for them to actually start that 1B. They've started with 75 and over. They will then move to 65 and over individuals. And then we're hoping that we'll be behind that. So it's coming, we hope, sometime in February, and are really looking forward to that. We do have next Tuesday is again a really important night for our BET, where we present the Board of Education budget, as well as the town of Greenwich will present, First Selectman will, and then there is a public hearing where you can actually share your thoughts with the BET about the proposed Board of Education budget. And we also have, I just want to share, we've had a lot of discussion, I think, over the last few weeks and at RTM as well, just about ADA and kind of what's happening in the district and just in general project updates. So the district is working hard right now to create an informational communication that will go out quarterly to RTM, BET, Board of Ed, that will list all of our major projects, provide a status, list some of our infrastructure projects that are multi-year projects to let people know how those are going. We'll also provide an update on kind of where we are for ADA. We are very committed and focused to ADA and have been. It's ongoing projects. Just to give an example, this fall, before we even really started discussing this issue at the town level, we had a feasibility study for Western because we knew that that was a building that was quite complex. So we have great information on that building right now. We are putting together basically a rubric for each building. So you'll be able to see which buildings have ADA main entrance, which buildings have elevators, which buildings have appropriate lifts, restrooms. You know, do we have a classroom on every grade level that has an ADA accessible sink? Do we have ADA accessible playgrounds, not only in the play equipment itself, but we've also been ongoing changing over from wood chips to rubber. So that will be coming out, and I just want people to know they'll have a clearer picture of a lot of the work that's ongoing. And obviously we have some really big projects where there's major work that has to be done in our three primary next big projects, and that is JC followed by OG and Riverside, where there are multiple, not just one issue, but just to be able to have functionality around the building and get through door frames and things of that nature. So I just share that is forthcoming. We've heard our community loud and clear, and we're going to communicate it effectively on some of those questions that have come up. So that's all from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're moving on to reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. We'll start with Ms. Stowe.
Real fast, before I do my update, Tony, you don't have to answer it now, but I know that I've been hearing from a lot of parents and students about, and I know we always look at our assessment schedule, but the Linkit and STAR happening at the same time seems to be frustrating a lot of people. It's overwhelming, and I know we approved it, but I don't know if we approved the timing of it. And I just think that's important feedback because, you know, there's enough stress right now. And so adding another layer of stress, I think is just something we should all be aware of. So that's just some feedback. But so can I go on? I'll go into my committee reports then straight away. First of all, the best thing I did in the past 2 weeks was going to the GHS XCOM meeting. Peter, you're never going back. I totally want to take over. It was so fun. These, I mean, Mark, Meredith, their entire team. First of all, Mark can run a meeting. He kept everyone on schedule and on task, and I appreciated their feedback, their engagement, their enthusiasm. They were just inspiring. So I actually asked if all of them can come in to speak at a board meeting as often as possible. That would be great for all of us. Then into the more boring stuff now, the budget committee, you know, we did, as I like to call it, our first semester work, where we worked with the administration to get a budget that we all thought was, you know, a strong one. Obviously it passed. But now the real work begins, right? We have to get this to have the BET and the RTM be excited about as well. So I think we all mentioned January 26th is an important date next week. And then of course we're working, Sean and the team are now working for preparing for a presentation on February 2nd, where of course we used to always go to town hall, but I assume we will now be doing that on Zoom. And then last but not least, just as a reminder, I am the liaison, actually Ralph put me on it a couple of years ago, to the Parks and Rec Field Feasibility Committee. And just as a reminder, this is a work that Dan Watson and I are doing with the Park and Recs team, because of course our fields are shared with both the Board of Ed and then there's town fields. And they're assessing the fields throughout the town. We focused, I think it was on 30 of the total. But that report is forthcoming. It was delayed a little bit with COVID, but just so you know, Weston and Sampson was the group that was, that's doing the entire program. And I believe that they hope to present it at the Parks and Rec meeting next week, which means it should be ready for prime time for the public in the next week or two. As soon as that is, I'll be sure to inform everyone. And of course, the links will be sent around. That's all.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Kelly.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to further elaborate on Tony's mention of our approvals for Cardinal Stadium. Yes, some great news. Last night, we sat in the meeting with our partners from the town who approved both. Well, we already had approval for 1A and we got final approval for 1B. So we worked very closely with all the town agencies, and we've succeeded in meeting all their standards, and their standards were good. We met them all, and we are now ready to move forward on this project. We expect this, the home side bleachers and all the groundwork surrounding the home side bleachers, buildings underneath, a nice elevator. We have a press box, all sorts of cool stuff. That'll be ready by June for the class of 2021 graduation ceremony. We hope to fill those bleachers up with happy parents watching their children graduate from Greenwich High School. We have a great group of people managing this project and plenty of experience, and the team's in place to get us to the finish line in a timely manner. We should be finished on schedule and under budget. We then will file very soon in February our plans for phase 2, and then I'll get you updated on that as phase 2 gets finished and submitted for approval with all our town partners. Looking forward to working with them again. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you. As a liaison for both CES and CABE, I wanted to give a quick update there. I attended the CABE legislative breakfast last week. Topics of discussion included COVID, the vaccine for our educators, and a look ahead to the return to in-person learning, as well as discussion on budget and state grants. And for CES, I wanted to give an update that they've been working with districts, including Greenwich, on offering professional development in areas such as teacher training to support digital learning, inclusivity in the workplace, and special education behavioral support and training. As the state legislature is requiring districts to provide training in coding and creation of STEAM culture classes for middle schoolers, CES created a grant for training teachers in K through 8. Those that are participating are working in collaboration to create lesson plans that will be shared without districts throughout the state of Connecticut, and Greenwich happens to be one of the 6 districts who are selected to be a part of that grant process. Turning now to special education, SEAC met last week. They voted on their subcommittees and also received an update from Mary Ford, the Chief Personnel Services Officer, on the new PPT survey that's being rolled out, and provided her with some valuable feedback on that. And finally, our special education audit update. They are moving ahead at full steam. The parents and teacher surveys have been closed out at the end of December. The data is currently being reviewed. The final parents focus groups were held yesterday, and the last one was today. PCG has also completed all of their remote classroom visits and observations and have begun their peer district reviews. I've also received some feedback from families of students with 504s regarding the survey, and for those parents and any others who would like to provide additional information, as Tony noted, PCG created an email which goes directly to them so that staff and parents can share information in a private and confidential way. Any of those emails that will be submitted will not be shared with GPS staff or administration, and the email address will be open until March 31st, and that is programreviewfeedback@pcgus.com, and they welcome all feedback from parents and staff members and the community. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, Ms. Olson.
Hi, yep. So a couple updates for Distinguished Teachers Awards Committee and in addition to Greenwich Alliance. So first with DTAC, we keep hearing over and over again that the teachers are bending over backwards and wearing many, many hats. So this is I can't think of a better year to nominate a teacher. The deadline is Thursday, March 11th. So that's approaching quickly. So Deadline is Thursday, March 11th. This year it will all be done online. One of our former recipients of a DTAC award, Vicky Capiali, has made a really great video that's easy to follow along. If you go to Greenwich Schools, there's a bar, nominate a teacher. You just click on the nominate a teacher tab. All the explanation of how to do so online and all relevant information is found right there on our website. So that's for DTAC. So start thinking and getting ready to nominate. Greenwich Alliance just met this week as well. A couple of updates. Actually, Francis Nobe had mentioned something that Greenwich Alliance helped fund the hip hop dancing for RLA students. And Greenwich Alliance is up to many amazing things right now. I'll just share on 3 or 4. So tomorrow, January 22nd, begins the first of 4 enrichment programs that are funded by the Greenwich Alliance for the remote school. So that is when students are watching a performance, sharing the youth involvement in the American Civil Rights Movement as seen in the eyes of Dr. Martin Luther King. Secondly, the Reaching Out grant application is open and is seeking proposals from GPS educators. The grant projects should change up the educational experience to raise student achievement. Julie Farnaz is available to discuss any grant ideas and provide direction. The deadline for submissions to the Alliance is March 26th. So we hope that the educators take advantage of these grants. The Alliance is really there to help make Greenwich Public Schools even better. We just had 74. There's 74 tuning into music students. 74 students are tuning into music and are taking lessons via Skype. So as we know, some students, their only music instrumentation they're getting right now is actually through the Greenwich Alliance because of current COVID protocols. So that's something else that the Greenwich Alliance has been raising money for and making available to students. And then finally, this week, 20 Greenwich High School students connected with students in Zimbabwe to begin a 4-week coding collaboration to create a website about empowering student voices. This opportunity is paid for by the Alliance and it's championed by Garfield Charles, the Assistant Dean, and Empowerment Program and Diversity Awareness. So those are just 4 of the 4 highlights from the Greenwich Alliance, but really excited to be able to help share out about what they're doing because it's really amazing stuff.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Miss Downey, bring us home.
Okay, I can't remember if I discussed the GHS entryway last month, but I'm just going to reiterate. So the committee's been formed, has it had its first organizational meeting. We have a chair, Steve Walco, a vice chair, and a secretary. We have our first real committee meeting next week, at which we're going to get going on hiring an architect. I think talking about the process for moving the project along as expeditiously as possible. So that's the entryway. Also for policy governance, what I want to say, so the committee met already since in the new year. And what we are currently doing is we have a task, which I just wanted to alert board members to, is in the process of adopting all the CABE policies. We never actually retired or rescinded our old policies. So as a result, if you go into the policies portion of the website, we kind of have these work, the old and the new. And what we're going to do is we are going through all of them, and we're going to be proposing at the first instance policies that the board should just simply rescind because they're already covered by new policies. Then we're going to turn to policies that need tweaking as we're going through that comparison process, and then things that we really find there are gaps. In the process of doing that, we're also looking at what CABE has for recommended and required policies on a variety of matters. So we're doing a bunch of different things, much organizational. So the board probably will be hearing that in February with a vote to rescind these kind of defunct policies to just kind of clean up matters for us.
All right, great. And I'll just remind you, we've still got the 2-read rule in effect, so we can either suspend it.
What CABE actually said, we don't need from a rescinding that we do, because we've already voted on the new policies, we don't need to follow the 2-read rule on those that are already covered by new things. To the extent we start tweaking or adjusting, that's a different story, but just we're trying to have the first bucket of clear out the redundant ones before we start getting to the ones that need additional work.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Chair.
This is for policy governance. Christina, two things. If we're gonna try to clear those off, I disagree with the one read because it kind of foists upon the board.
Okay.
So
No, okay.
I'm okay with a one read if you could figure out, this is long overdue, and this predates you as the chairman. There've been two other chairmen that this has been discussed with, and it just, I don't know, it never got done, or it never got presented to the board. And this has been a long project, so I appreciate how hard it is we never really got a crosswalk from
Right,
a documented crosswalk, right?
So my plan was to present when it's presented to the board, and if we get on the timetable, we're hoping to, at least with this first bucket of ones. The plan would be to present, no, I'm going to present old policies and the corresponding new policy together.
Yeah, what I was going to suggest is if you could send the crosswalk in advance, maybe attach it to a board meeting or whatever as a read, not an item, so that we can go do the homework, and then when we come to the meeting, it's
pro forma. Yeah.
Well, it's more efficient, right? And we're focused on. And the second thing is a question. Where do you stand with? They used to be called procedures. I think now they're called regulations. There are so many of them that are out of date, and the administration, you know, long ago, even before Tony was here, was supposed to be updating all of those, because many of them we approved now 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Right.
And the regulations have not been updated.
Tony has been working with us on the committee as we're going through these to be sure she's got the regulations. And in part, some of them will be basically taking old policies / procedures, what we were calling policies, which were really more in the nature of regulations. And she's crafting them into regulations, procedures. So that is part of our process.
So when do we expect that? Because this is,
well,
no offense to you, you're the new committee chair, but it's kind of like, this is like a Groundhog Day on this story.
Yes, I
appreciate you getting it done.
Well, let's see. Hopefully I do get it done. We don't vote on the procedures.
No, I know that.
So, but we have asked Tony as she works with us, and she sits in our PGC meetings with us.
Right.
And as we're going through in this process, like for example, I'm going to use one as an example. We had a procedure on facilities rentals. I'm going to use that just as a really clean example. What we had as a policy was really like the form you had to fill out and all those little things, which are really procedure, regulations or procedures. So as we rescind them as a policy, she can then take those and turn them into the regulations / procedures. Let's call them regulations just for clean.
If you could do an alignment and crosswalk of all of this.
That is our plan.
Yeah,
that is our plan.
Including the regulations, so we can read the regulations and give feedback on them. If they're not, if they're perceived as not aligning to the intent of policy, that would be great.
Well, they should always align to the intent of policy.
I know, and through the best intentions of people, sometimes they don't always, there are many instances internally where they don't line up, and I don't think it was any malfeasance by anybody, it was just communication.
It's an unbelievable volume of information in a number of places, and things are cross-referenced. So it is a little overwhelming. So our goal, that's why I said our goal was first to deal with the easy ones, right? Let's clean out the clearly redundant, on point ones. Maybe some have regulations, maybe they don't. And then it at least clears the decks a little bit, kind of the notion of the easy to get rid of, the ones that are minor adjustments or tweaks, and then the bigger ones. right? So we kind of have three silos that we're kind of attacking it as.
I think
is
the way
plan.
Barbara O'Neill did it, and I'll call you about it separately so we don't take up any more time here, but she brought it section by section, so it was very coherent.
Yes.
It wasn't like this scattershot thing all over the place.
Correct.
And it might make sense.
We've been
might
using
make
that
it
as
easier and more efficient if that model was pretty useful.
No, we have that, but
Okay.
the problem with that is it's not as linear as we're thinking in terms of cleaning the decks.
Yeah.
So it's
Thank
okay. We have it, but I appreciate your
All right,
thoughts.
so thank you both. I think you've got a path forward. And Christina, when we get to agenda planning, just remind me to put policy in there so that you can give us an update at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our discussion items. The first item is the strategic plan update. Mr. Sher, I guess you don't have a formal document, but if you could kind of let us know where we are, because it's also listed on our February agenda. So if you want to.
Yeah, Peter, I think we should figure out what we need. We could decide that after this discussion. I'll just give everybody an update. I said, hi, everyone. We provided a strategy update at our December meeting. So I apologize in advance if this update is at all redundant, but it's probably a good idea. Sometimes reminders are helpful. I know everyone was diligently focused only on things school board right before the holidays, so you remembered everything, but I'll just give some reminders. That said, some background is worth reminding. First, just as context, is we have an existing strategy that we voted on unanimously to extend until replaced with an update the existing strategy. That strategy is now 5 years old, and it was designed that way for that length of time to allow the administration to sufficient time to execute. It was and is a bold, ambitious, and innovative strategy, or at least it was at the time that it was adopted. The strategy calls for our district to transition from the current factory model of education prevalent in K-12 in most of the United States to a model based on personalized instruction and learning. And boy, did we not know how useful that would be to have that as a concept, given the advent of this horrendous scourge that is COVID. The strategy is completely centered on students and achieving mastery of the Greenwich curriculum, as well as educating our students with life skills necessary to succeed in the 21st century. It is a strategy with clear performance objectives and goals that are 100% centered, student-centered, and are tightly aligned with the vision, mission, and strategy of Greenwich Public Schools, which are also articulated in our policy, which we were just discussing. The original strategy was developed and responsive to all stakeholders, but it is first and foremost oriented towards parents and students. Where there were trade-offs of goals between other stakeholders and students, students always won the day in the decision. And I think that was a tradition that this board is committed to continuing. If you're not sufficiently familiar with the existing strategy, it's described in detail on the strategy section of the GPS website. It's listed under in its own independent section under Board of Education from our main page. Just another reminder, we began a process to refresh and reconsider our strategy last January. The process was interrupted by COVID, and we re-engaged in the committed process this fall. If you have any questions about the process, you can refer to the original presentations of last winter. To those of us in the board, we're following the same steps. We're not deviating from that plan. That brings us to what the committee is doing now and where we are. You'll recall that we had a working session to review, validate, and modify the vision and mission of Greenwich Schools. That was done last January. Having a clear concept of the organization's mission, the reason for being, and a vision of what we want to accomplish is a prerequisite for any strategy process. had consensus, and we're moving forward in the strategy process based on that agreement. We realize that the BOE administrators and community don't necessarily have a clear understanding of what strategy is, what it might look like, and how it's used. So the strategy committee of Karen, and Peter, my wife's name is Karen, so I have entirely too many Karens in my life. We thought having best practices examples of strategies in a K-12 setting would be helpful to those people who are interested in the subject, but particularly to the members of the board. So we reviewed strategies or similar frameworks from leading districts around the country that might have similarities to Greenwich. We reviewed more than 15 of them, but examples would include the strategy documents for Bellevue, Washington, Palo Alto, California, Scarsdale, New York, Barrington, Illinois, Andover, Massachusetts. Essentially, we were looking at high expectation, high performing suburban school districts, because many of the issues faced are the same, many of the community expectations are the same, and it provides a framework and an exemplar of how these have been used effectively to govern school systems and advance on behalf of students. We reviewed them and selected some of these as exemplars for the board and other stakeholders to review. We'll be posting those on the BOE website next week under the same section for strategy under the Board of Education. Next, we'll be surveying stakeholders to update community input about the school system necessary to inform any consideration we have about the current strategy or modifying to a new strategy. Our intent is to build on information we already have from other survey instruments sent to parents, students, staff, and other community stakeholders. We don't want to inundate the community with a new, deep survey if we already have information from surveys that have been sent in the past and most recently as a result of regular survey schedules we have, like the Panorama survey, which tells us a lot about the attitudes and wants and needs of students. The survey focuses on key questions prepared by a public consulting group known as PCG, who managed the original strategy and is the group managing the special education review. They provide an excellent framework, so we're using that. They're a credible and professional group, so we saw no reason not to follow their methodology. In preparation, we reviewed surveys given by other peer districts, trying to discern community attitudes and goals for schools. If we've made a mistake in this process, it's been spending too much time on creating survey overload, looking at too many other districts, but it seemed an important step to get members of our committee comfortable for any kind of new survey that we would launch in Greenwich. So it was worth the time and the investment. Fortunately, we're supported in the formulation of the survey by a GPS parent who is volunteering their time, who is an expert in surveying to properly discern community attitudes. In addition, we've incorporated any input we've received from the board. The next steps that for the board would be after the survey is launched, which it'll be launched before the break, we'll review the survey of the results. We'll review the results of the survey rather, review the data, and then what we need to do as a group is summarize the data, turn it into findings and insight that can inform the next step of the process. We'll also need to have a session to discuss the implications of any of these findings for the current strategy and decide whether or not we would continue with the current strategy, which was a critical question we've discussed before, or consider a new strategic direction for Greenwich Public Schools. I would expect we'd be ready to have these two conversations in early March. And Peter, I'd look forward to working with you on an appropriate schedule to be able to have that interactive session, either as part of a board meeting retreat or as a separate independent session. So with that, I'll pause and take any questions.
So Peter, just before we get to that, and as I mentioned earlier, I think this is also up on the agenda plan for February. You're actually looking for a March date instead. Just want to make sure I note that.
Yeah, I don't think there will be a meaningful update in February, Peter.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think we should do that in March. Of course, I'll give a regular committee update in our February meeting. But in terms of a meaningful interaction as a separate agenda item, I think March is a better time.
So Peter, I don't know.
Our goal remains to bring this to closure by the end of June.
All right. Now, I don't know how much your committee's been involved in the survey, but obviously before you send anything out to the community, I think a board discussion is probably warranted. So I just want to note that.
Well, I think what we'll do, Peter, is we've taken the input from board members that have provided it. I'd encourage board members to come to any committee meeting about that. And we're going to follow the same process that's been used by all other committees who are sending out surveys to get the input we need to do the work.
I'm not sure what other committees are sending out surveys.
Well, as an example, right now in the special ed survey, as an example, that was handled in that committee, and there have been others. So I think we're going to follow the same process.
Right, well, those surveys actually came from the outside group, Peter. I guess I'd ask that you let us know when your next meeting is scheduled so we can encourage members.
Yeah, the good news is we post those, and they're required. We're following a strict protocol to post those. So we'd love to have board members come to these and participate, and we'd love to get more input so that the work of the committee is more meaningful in serving the needs of the whole board.
Anybody else have questions for Mr. Scherer, comments on where we are in the strategic plan update? All right, not seeing any hands, and we'll come back to it during agenda planning just for timing purposes. All right.
I just want to say, as in closing to this, I really want to thank Karen and Karen for all this hard work. In the past few months, we've met 6 times, which is a lot. And I know a lot of committees meet frequently, but this committee is meeting very frequently, and we're really digging in. Tony is attending all of those too. So it's helpful that any concerns that would come from the administration and anything we're doing are incorporated. So I want to thank all of them for their hard work over the last few months.
All right, with that, we're going to move on to our next discussion item, which is the GHS Course of Study Guide. I'll turn it over to Dr. Carabillo and Mr. Mayo.
Good evening again, folks. Just to tell you probably what you already know, Greenwich High School Course of Study Guide is a large document, but is an excellent document because it does a great job in describing the academic program at Greenwich High School. We have highlighted some modifications that we have made to the Course of Study Guide for your, so you guys can look at that tonight. And we're here to explain exactly what we did and why, why we made those specific modifications to the Course of Study Guide. There are no new courses being offered next year, so we can take that off the table, but there are some modifications that the program administrators and program coordinators made along with Judy Nanell, the director of guidance, and our lead on this major project every year, Dana Talato, who's our vice principal. So I'm going to turn this over to Dana, and she will discuss the modifications that have been made to the Course of Study Guide. And as always, the Course of Study is a draft until the Board of Education approves it. So thank you, Dana.
Thank you, Ralph. So good evening, everyone. I wanted to start by highlighting that the biggest change organizationally to the 152-page Course of Study Guide is that every department now has its own section, and specifically all the departments are now listed in alphabetical order. We thought it made sense. If you look at page 4, which is the contents page, it's easy to see that. Also, once students are able to look at this and families are able to look at this online, as you scroll through it, it's pretty easy to see alphabetically where you are as you look at the little sidebar. I also wanted to highlight 3 pages in particular. I know that you were given a 4-page document that kind of highlights the big changes, but there's 3 pages in particular I do want to draw your attention to. The first would be on page 6, and this is where there's the credits required for the class of 2023 and beyond. An idea that we had in order to support our students and really give them more ways to satisfy the 25 graduation requirements is that we asked each of the program heads to really look at their courses and say, is there some rationale behind why we should consider having other courses count under other clusters? And so in particular, what I would like to highlight is that under the career and life skills, we want to add specific social studies classes. To be very specific, we're thinking of AP Psychology, regular psychology, Law in America, AP Economics, and Sociology. And the rationale behind those is that the Social Studies Department believes that there are multiple career pathways that come out of each of these fields that are studied. They're also asking that we consider AP Government and Civics. As we all know right now, being an informed and engaged citizen and voter is a life skill that we want all of our students to have. The second one would be, in addition to the humanities elective, would be our AVID classes. The rationale there is that students in our AVID classes are provided with learning experiences to advance their reading, their writing, their critical thinking and communication skills. And in the instructional strategies are similar to that taught in our English and social studies courses. The last one would be additions to the STEM electives, and specifically it would be video production and select business classes. So we are asking all 4 of our video production classes to be considered. And then under our business, it is investments, accounting, honors financial accounting, and personal finance. And the rationale there for adding these as STEM electives for our students is that they all require math, critical thinking, and complex problem solving skills. The next page that I'd like to draw your attention to would be page 7. And this is kind of going along with some of the conversation you were having earlier about the regulations. So we have the district graduation performance standards. One of the things I want to point out is actually, to be really honest, it's an error with the scoring. So if you look specifically, it says currently one of the ways to meet the writing performance standard is to earn a 22 or above in the ACT writing. That's actually not possible. The ACT writing score ranges from a 2 to a 12. And I had Bridget Barry from our English department verify that it is in fact a mean score of 6 is what the students would earn on that. So we are asking for consideration that we change this to a 6 or above on the ACT writing. The second thing, which does encumber 1, 2, 3 different ones. So under the reading performance standard, under the writing performance standard, and under the math performance standard, the current language says that as long as our students in a junior or senior year class earn a 70% or higher on a final examination, that is one of the ways they can meet those graduation performance standards. We are asking to include not just finals, but also midterms, because we view it as a matter of semantics. When a student takes a final exam, it covers a semester's worth of content, very similar, although not this year. A midterm covers a semester's worth of content. So we are asking for that consideration. Again, we feel it's another way to support our students. The last page that I'd like to draw your attention to would be page 78. Under the physical education and health and safety section. As I'm sure you are aware, with the class of 2023 and beyond, the requirement for health and safety was included. And this actually is an increase of 0.125 credits for our rising juniors. They used to just have 0.125 of wellness 11, but now we're going to be having health and safety 11. Specifically, I wanted to draw your attention to how we're going to accomplish that. So as a junior next year, students will take one marking period of either sports medicine or personal training and fitness. That will count as a health elective. So that's 0.125 credits. They will then take a one marking period class, also worth 0.125 credits, formerly called Wellness 11, now called Health and Safety 11. And the final 2 PE credits, each one marking period for a total of 0.25 credits, would be a PE elective of their choice, and then, or they could take PE 11. So those are the big changes, at least from our perspective, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about really anything in the course of study guide.
All right, thank you very much. We've got our first victim, Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you guys for the update. I was going to say I've a bunch of the changes really make sense, make it very easy for some of the students to kind of navigate their way through such a large and a full document. But I had a question on 2 different things. One was for courses. With the addition of the capstone experience as a graduation requirement for the class of 2023 and beyond, will you guys be adding a more detailed description on what the requirements for this will be in the course catalog and what year it might be completed? As I see that you only note it's going to be embedded in existing projects and activities developed by GHS as assured experiences, because I think it would be very helpful for students to know what their workload might be and for what year they would be expected to complete this when they're selecting courses for that year.
Karen, I think that's a great point. That's something that we didn't consider to actually outline it. I want to say that the rationale probably was that when it was first put in there, the administrators who were in charge of it probably hadn't fleshed it out in its entirety. I can say that we have 10 of the vision of the graduate, their assured experiences that each of the different departments is responsible for. So every year students have an opportunity to meet, I will say, a 10th of them in each of their different classes, with the ultimate goal that over the 4 years, they've earned that 1.0 credit. So that's definitely something that we can consider adding. I think it makes sense.
And I know, I know we are talking a lot about STEM and coding, and I just know that there seems to be a smaller section of options for STEM credits, especially for freshmen and sophomore. It sort of requires them to really bulk up in their junior and senior year or have to take extra math or science. In general, it's not such a big deal, but especially here due to the hybrid classes and the students not being able to be taking certain electives. I know that might be an issue going forward for this year's freshman and sophomore classes. Just a thought. And then the question I had on the performance standards, I know we're asking the students to earn a 70% or higher on their final exams in grades 11 or 12. And I know you want to add the midterms, which I think is great. How will that work though if a student fails a final or the course overall? Because there are some courses, the finals do cover the full year's work.
Actually, no, that's every one of our courses, a final counts for a semester's worth of content. If a student wasn't able to earn a 70% on either a midterm or a final, there are other ways that they can meet that. So that is in the course study guide. I believe it falls under page 7. It outlines the other ways that they could meet it.
And thank you, by the way, for updating the scoring for the ACT as a rubric, because that changed in 2016 from 36 down to 2 to 12. But I'm curious because we are using 70% sort of as a benchmark for midterms or finals. And I was just curious as to why we would choose sort of 6 as the base score, because that sort of equates to about 50%. A score of 7 equates to about the 66th percentile. Because I know the national average for that is 6.5. So I was just curious, if how we landed on 6.
You're talking about for the ACT writing, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I was told that 6 was what the average was. You're saying it's 6.5?
Well, yeah, that number comes from the ACT Reporter National Norms.
Right.
They covered 2.8 million students that took the exam in 2017, 2018, 2019.
Okay.
Between 20, yeah.
I'm happy to bring that back to the head of the English department and have further discussion on should it be.
And I can send you the report that I found that in, so.
Sure.
If you want to take a look. So I was just curious, and I know we're talking, the other question I have is, since I was diving a little deeper, when you were talking about achieving that again for the Connecticut School SAT, a second level of achievement, which I wasn't entirely sure what that referred to, but we note that achieving a 420 or higher on the PSAT or the SAT is suitable, but PSATs and SATs are scored differently. I know you know that. And, you know, SATs average, I think, is around a 530, 420 equates to around the 15th percentile. So that sort of was low. Also, I was just curious, again, if these just haven't been adjusted, or much like the ACT, which hadn't been adjusted for a couple of years, if that was something we might want to take a quick look at, only because we want to make sure whatever we're asking our students to do, if it's 70% performance on a midterm or a final, we would want to make sure that whatever the alternatives are matching in a similar range. So, and again, I'm happy to send you, I was just curious.
Yeah, that was not something we looked at in particular. That wasn't a concern that was raised by any of the school counselors. As I've been living it this first half of the year, helping our current seniors meet these graduation performance standards. So no, that's just, quite honestly, it's just not something that we thought to look into to see if it should be higher or not.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know if it had been looked at in a long time or not. So anyway, thank you, because we just want to make sure they're on the same page. Thanks.
No problem.
All right, Mr. Scher.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for the work by you and Ralph and the rest of the team. It's always interesting when new people come and they take a fresh look at things. It's probably pretty healthy. This is just the first read, so I'm looking to just kind of understand at this point and not give too much feedback. But I'm a little confused by the midterm or final. Can you help me understand that for when it's a semester long class and when it's I don't understand why you did this.
Sure.
Can you help me understand that? And I think it has to do with a semester long class versus a full year class.
Right.
But maybe that's wrong.
So let me try to answer your question, and if you have more clarifying questions, then go ahead. So in a full year class, okay, we currently give a midterm exam, not this year, but typically in January, and then a final exam in June. Correct. And each of those in a full year class covers a semester's worth of content. So a final exam is not probably like what we might remember when we took it. My final exam back in high school covered the entire year. That's not what ours cover. Ours cover a semester's worth of content. So similar to, so that's why we're asking, if we were going to consider 70% or higher on a final, which has always covered a semester's worth of content, a midterm also covers a semester's worth of content. So why would we not try to support our students by allowing either one?
You answered the question then.
Great.
Okay. I'm not sure that was the board's intent when it approved these standards, but that's okay. My second question was about this. When you guys had this discussion, did you go to the board policy on graduation requirements and go through each one of those items?
You cut off at the beginning. Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. When you guys talked about making these modifications, did you review the board's policy on graduation requirements?
Yes, we did go back to, and the language that has always lived in the course of study guide has come right from that.
Yeah.
So that's where, when we were looking back, is this even something we could change? That's when we realized it was falling under the regulations.
Yeah, the reason I bring this up is I hate to give these history lessons. A couple of years ago, we had a real problem with graduation requirements. We were graduating kids that were not meeting requirements. It was a bit of a controversy at the time. The board intercepted that and made special accommodations and modifications. But it was a reminder to your predecessors, Ralph's predecessor and to your predecessor, to tightly adhere to the board policy on graduation requirements. The good news about those requirements, to Ms. Hirsch's point, is if you go read those, one of the beauties of them is there's 5 or 6 different ways a student can meet a requirement. So it's built in multiple pathways. But the intent of it was, to Ms. Hirsch's point, is that they would be comparable, right? It's because different students are going to get there in different ways, but the performance standard should be the same and it should be consistent. And that was really very much of its intent. So I know this is the first read. I would encourage you guys, because the world changes, right? You made the point about ACT scoring as an example. I would go back and look at the policy, and if you have any questions, I'm sure you can talk to Ms. Downey from the Policy Governance Committee because they can provide clarity. I wouldn't look so much, I'm going to look at the regulations, but I would look at the policy. And I agree with Ms. Hirsch. I think the general intent, although I don't remember precisely, was to have our performance standard be reasonably high, but not so high that kids couldn't, jump over it. Kind of a middle road, consistent with what Greenwich wants to be as an excellent school system. And that's why I say leveraging around a number of 70%, which is effectively, if you think about it in grading, that's saying we're going to graduate a kid that has a C-. We never went back and reviewed that policy. I don't know if we want to now. Maybe it's something the committee could consider for the future. But I would hope if you're going to make these adjustments, they seem to make a lot of sense. But I would go back and look at that policy and be sure that any of those that you're suggesting or that you're going to consider after this meeting are very much consistent with the policy, not only in the word, but also in the intent. Could I ask one other question? I don't know if anybody else has another hand. I just had one other, but.
Actually, you go ahead and wrap up and then we'll move on.
Okay. Dana, maybe separately, and you don't need to answer it here. I never liked the state of Connecticut adding to the graduation requirements. It removed, for a school system like ours that has a course catalog that's like a college, right? It removed a lot of flexibility, and we already have a very high standard for performance. So I appreciate what you guys have done, which is to try to categorize things so that kind of moves into the background. It gives students a lot more flexibility. My hat's off to you guys to really think out of the box and do that. But I am concerned also as we do that we need to be careful not to dilute our core. And the part of the core I'm concerned about diluting is STEM. It's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I'm from the IT industry. It came from my industry to solve a particular problem. I'm very sensitive to bastardizing STEM. I'm not in love with the idea of STEAM, but we're going to come to that. So I'm a little bit concerned that some of the courses we're talking about using to retire that. I'm okay with it for purposes of helping kids navigate, but I want to be very, very careful that we don't water down the expectations of true STEM education, true 4 years of STEM education for every student in the district. Because along with the humanities, that's our absolute core in terms of what we need kids to be teaching and what they're learning academically. That's true all through K-12. So I pass that on as feedback because this is the first read. It is a concern of mine. I'm sure you'll be brilliant and convince me it's a great idea. But I just wanted to make sure that we're being true to the academic core and we don't slip and slide inadvertently.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
Thanks, guys. This is an awesome guide, and I look at this with a new set of eyes as I have an 8th grader, and I'm scared by this. So I expect some time on this, maybe after the meeting. But first of all, so no additions, and I remember sitting in Old Greenwich when we approved a computer science class that went beyond AP, and I thought that's cool. Why didn't any removals? Did we even think about that? Like classes that haven't actually, you know, that maybe a few years running have, you know, not many students joining. Was there any consideration for reducing classes at this time? And then I have one other question after that.
Sure. So we always ask all of the program heads to look at the courses that they've offered or are, you know, that live in the course of study guide, and is there anything that we could potentially come out. And we also have Dave Marinacci run basically what courses haven't run in, you know, X amount of years, just to kind of see. There were some that we were on the fence with, but we felt that was in the science area, but because of NGSS, we were a little fearful to remove them just yet. Should students actually want to enroll in them this year, we're kind of hoping. So I hope that answers your question. No, we did look at it, but we decided nothing was going to be removed.
And but I guess if it doesn't reach a certain number of children in a section, you don't run the class. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess, so then there's no harm in a sense of keeping it there for now. It's not like, okay, fine. And then my second question, just because it made me think about it and looking through it, is Innovation Lab. We haven't heard about that in a while. I know that was obviously, it's kind of what Country Day has formed their school system on. And I know it was created at GHS. How is that program in general? Is that growing, or are we about the same?
Ralph, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Kathleen, the enrollment in Innovation Lab isn't what we would like it to be. So we're really pushing hard this year to make that happen. We have a bunch of dedicated staff who really believe in this process and this way to educate students. And when you go down there, it's like, you know, you're walking in there and they're doing projects, and they're really learning, but they're learning in a different way. And they're going to get out there and they're really going to be publicizing and trying to recruit 9th graders like yours to come into Innovation Lab. So that's where we are, but we're not happy with our enrollment. So we made some significant changes to Innovation Lab this year.
Okay, makes sense. All right, thank you.
Ms. Kowalski.
Thanks, Peter. So I had just a general overall observation, and I guess a question on that point. So it seems, I would say that, you know, obviously Greenwich has a particularly high standard of excellence, and we're trying to fit a very thick course catalog in that we offer all of our students into, so that they can still able to hit the Connecticut requirements. And my observation here is, for example, with respect to needing to fill a career and life skills credit. I give you credit for putting AP psychology, AP economics, government and comparative politics class, and a civics class, all in career and life sciences. My first read and probably my second read would not have put those classes in a particular career and life skills. So I guess my observation here is that perhaps where we are, you've done an excellent job of maintaining that standard of excellence for students to take these quite challenging classes to help fulfill that career and life skills credit. So I guess if that observation is accurate, then I would say we're reorganizing our classes for kids to take these advanced classes to still meet the Connecticut standard. Is that a fair assessment in what you were looking and trying to achieve here?
Yes, I would say the biggest piece of feedback I've heard from our school counselors very loud and clear this year is that for the class of 2023 and beyond, they are most concerned actually about what Peter spoke about, the STEM elective. That one, the career and life skills is, I'll be transparent, is pretty easy for our students to hit, right? To take, there's so many different options. It's
Okay.
really a STEM elective where some of the students are limited in what it's forcing them to not be able to take maybe a second or third year video production class where it is a passion for them. So that was kind of the intent, was to really look at the big picture and with what students have typically taken in order to help them now meet this increase of 3 credits.
Got it. No, like, look, my overall in viewing this, right, I looked at this as a way of making sure that we weren't changing our course requirements for purposes of appeasing the state requirements and somehow diminishing the standard of excellence and the standard that we are requiring our students, that put them in a deficit when graduating, that they're not taking those Excel classes to take something that the state wants them to take versus what we think that Greenwich education should provide. But I'm seeing that we've accomplished that goal of being able to maintain the excellence of our standards here. I just wanted to get your take on it and make sure that I was reading it the right way.
All right, Miss Downey.
Okay, Dana and Ralph. My 3 kids have already gone through Greenwich High School, and I did look at the course of study guide. And I think that the reorganizing is a great idea and fresh eyes. I guess my one concern is the people doing the organizing all know it so well. I want to be sure we're covering like kind of the uninitiated person, like that they read this and they fully understand what's involved. So I'm not sure how you do that other than you kind of do some tests with some freshmen or some, I don't know. It's just, this was just kind of some feedback just to be sure, you know, the authors have seen it enough times that, you know, you kind of know it forwards and backwards. And so whether you've considered giving some fresh eyes to it to be sure it's really accomplishing the goals of communicating all the things you want communicated in this new structure.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, it's a great idea.
So this is Peter Bernstein. I guess I've said it before, I'll say it again. We basically are running a small college. I think we offer as many courses as some small colleges do. And there's just not enough hours in the day for kids to take everything that they might want to take. So, you know, it's sort of a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. One thing I want to point out to the board right now, the course of study guide is actually listed as a consent item for the February meeting. You know, if major changes are going to be made, my suggestion is we'll move it to an action item. I'll keep a note of that. And as we get closer to the meeting, we'll see where this lands. Because we don't have the ability to modify our agendas like we used to when we were meeting live. So we'll just have to keep
Peter, I think it's wise just to make it as an action. If it becomes perfunctory, it's perfunctory. But to your point, this changing of agendas is a little harder. So as you've said many times, right, we can always make the harder decision, but if we lock it in on consent, then we won't have the ability to break it out. Since it's first read and then we're having a second read, it seems to make sense to make it an action.
Fair enough. I've got it noted. Thank you for that. And actually, just to Ralph and to Christina's point, as the parent of an 8th grader who has spent enough time and is probably listening now, spent enough time looking through the course of study guide, you know, I still am not as adept at it, I think, as the students are. So, you know, I'm happy to be a guinea pig, but the 8th graders obviously are tackling this for the first time now. Course selection is just kind of getting underway in the middle school. So, you know, I think we won't lock this in until next month, but I think that's a good test audience for you.
I agree. You know, we have until, Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, we have till the end of March for the students to complete course selection. So we have some time to fiddle with this document before we send it out as a non-draft. So we will go back, take a look at policy, go back and take a look at some of the scoring that you all have mentioned and bring it back.
Great. Peter, I see your hand is still up. Was there anything else or?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, Dana. I think I read and I can't find it right now. There was a lot of changes this time and good things. I thought I read somewhere, did I read somewhere we took out the recommended paths? Where, a kid says, if you're tracked to this course, this course, this course, this course.
Oh,
Did I read that somewhere or am I dreaming?
you're talking about the course sequence charts. So
Yes.
you mean, right. So the one you're probably remembering is under English. I don't know if you remember, English used to have a very interesting chart with arrows going everywhere. We removed that and incorporated the language that students, regardless of what class they come in as a freshman, there's multiple pathways, multiple levels that they could take throughout their 4 years at Greenwich High School.
Is it just that one and the other one? The only reason I ask is we put them in, we asked for them to be put in so that there was a better map for a parent to follow.
Right. So
Yeah, it's a great map, Peter, but at the same time, it looks like
confusing.
Like we're tracking kids. So that's why we changed the format a little bit.
Right. But if you, Peter, if you look at the start of every section, you will see some sort of course sequence.
Okay.
One that was taken out was the English chart. That's on page 43. I'm sorry, page 36.
Yeah, I'm keying off of Christina's point and Peter's point on, you guys and the guidance counselors are so immersed in this and the students become immersed in it. But I have to tell you, as a parent, having a really dumbed down map to follow, or at least to have a concept, between all the courses and the course numbers and the block schedule, and it makes parents' heads spin. Now, we're all living with it, but I'm just thinking about parents again. And I don't know that you guys always get that feedback. The beauty is the depth of the program and the options students have. But it's pretty daunting for parents, particularly those coming in who haven't seen it or heard it before. So something to think about. Finding the best way to communicate and have parents think about how to participate in the planning with their kids. We have such great resources, particularly in guidance, to the degree that we can take all that stuff that's in people's brains and get it onto paper. It's so helpful to parents. And, even though we're kind of people who aren't shy in our professional lives, when it comes to schools, you'd be surprised how shy parents are.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
I can probably lower my hand, but I was just going to point out what Ms. Tulata did, which all of those sequencing for each core subject is still in there, just looks slightly different. Math course sequencing still looks like the old traditional way. And then if you also look in the back, like page 137 to 138, they added career and college pathways. It's really also outlined like from different perspectives, how you can, what those courses align to. I was just pointing that out. If you go in there, it just looks different than it did in the past. That's all, I think.
All right, thank you, everyone. So this will come back to us in February as an action item. So we'll look forward to hearing that. In the meantime, if anybody has questions, please email them to the superintendent. Our next item is the Hamilton Avenue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you all. All right, so the next discussion item is the Hamilton Avenue School Magnet update. So I'll turn it over to Mr. D'Amico and Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Bernstein, members of the board, and to our 76 attendees that are still with us. Before I turn it over to Ms. Smith, I was wondering if you knew what Bracken Darrell, Jack Ma, and Brian Chesky all had in common. And Peter, this is in your wheelhouse, so I would expect that you know, but I will put you on the spot. Bracken Darrell from Logitech majored in English. Jack Ma, Alibaba, has a bachelor's degree in English, and Brian Chesky majored in fine arts. Now, I know there's some controversy versus STEM versus STEAM, And I would encourage you to go back. In about 2018, there was an article that kind of debated STEM versus STEAM and why one letter matters. And there was a noted engineering professor named Vivek Wadhwani. She wrote, "An engineering degree is very valuable, but the sense of empathy that comes from music, arts, literature, and psychology provides a big advantage in design." So with that, I want to introduce Ms. Shanta Smith, who can take you through the Hamilton Avenue STEAM update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. Chairman of the board, Greenwich Public Schools board members, Superintendent Jones, colleagues, Greenwich Public Schools staff, families, scholars, and community members. My name is Shanta Smith, and I am the proud principal of Hamilton Avenue STEAM Magnet School. I have the pleasure of sharing with you updates regarding our transition from STEM to STEAM. As you may recall, last January of 2020, I presented to you regarding our transition from STEM to STEAM. Next slide, please. During this presentation, I will provide a review of my first year in the school district and how I use my entry plan to learn more about our magnet school theme. I will provide an overview of what that entailed from the summer of 2019 to the present. I will share accomplishments we have achieved during this year and a half during my tenure as the school principal. And I will share next steps that will help us to work towards the continuous improvement of the implementation of our magnet school theme at Hamilton Avenue School. Next slide, please. Review of year one, the entry plan. Explore. Every leader begins their work with the crafting of an entry plan. My 3 goals were to explore, engage, and elevate the work of our school. I explored through assessment and analysis of our school. I worked with the staff to perform a needs assessment to establish our strengths and areas in need of improvement. The needs assessment consisted of a review of key areas of our school community, primarily academics, our magnet school theme, personal and interpersonal capacities, second step, classroom matrix and classroom management, culture and climate, and PBIS. In addition, I reviewed and analyzed current and historical standardized test scores, current and historical school climate survey data, formative assessments, measures used to determine our Connecticut School Performance Index, and cross-check them with school-based practices. I also reviewed the school theme proposal submitted in 2014 prior to my arrival that consisted of a 5-year action plan from 2014 to 2019, which included budgetary and structural supports for the implementation of the magnet school theme for Hamilton Avenue School, as well as the actions taken. In addition, I ascertained data from the Hamilton Avenue School community and actions taken as a result of that. I interviewed individuals with Hopes and Dreams conferences, staff members, district leadership, community liaisons, and of course, most importantly, our families and our students. I also hosted Snapchats with the scholars throughout the school year, monthly meetings with the student council leadership, regular principal chats with families and staff, and ongoing conversations during our regularly scheduled PTA meetings. Engage. So during and after the needs assessment, I engaged stakeholders through communication and outreach. To engage our learning community, I identified and implemented systems and structures to build connections with scholars, staff, and parents in the areas of culture, climate, academic programming, and the magnet theme. These events occurred during principal chats, open houses, STEM nights, community meetings, multicultural nights, Zumba night, PTA meetings, concerts, and parent visitation events. Parent visitation events were structures that were newly introduced to Hamilton Avenue School for the parents to come into the building, increasing opportunities for them to see the STEM in action and to strengthen our school culture and climate. During these engagement events, I had many conversations with parents regarding what they loved about Hamilton Avenue School. Elevate. After conducting the needs assessment and learning about our wonderful school, I began to explore more deeply who we are as a learning community and who we would like to become. My findings indicated the following. STEAM has been an interest of the school community for several years. In fact, in the 2014 report that was submitted, the document indicated that arts must be a central part of the program. They recommended a change of the name from STEM to STEAM. And this was because they love their K-2 Suzuki program, and they felt strongly about it not being taken away due to STEM. As a school, we recognize the importance of updating our classroom matrices to further strengthen our school practices as we work to continually implement our school norms and expectation, inclusive of digital learning practices, resulting in our scholars' development of their personal, academic, and interpersonal capacities. Scholars have been doing a great job using this matrix to self-assess as individuals and as a class. Teachers are working diligently with our scholars to plan and implement systems and structures to address priority areas, strengthening our SAT process, focusing on data, approaching social issues that we may have related to tardiness, second step implementation. Those are just a few. Key components with the implementation center around our laser-like focus on adopting strategies and processes to improve student achievement and enhance our magnet school theme. Next slide, please. Overview. As you can imagine, the pandemic interrupted some of our plans and required us to pivot. Some plans were delayed, but not deterred. Last year, our school improvement plan focused on the percentage of scholars who will meet or exceed at or above benchmark in ELA and the number of scholars who would meet or exceed at or above benchmark in math. We also included measures related to the panorama to support family engagement. However, as a result of the pandemic, we did not obtain the traditional endpoint data that were included in our original plans. Therefore, we turned a crisis into an opportunity. Teachers used formative assessments to determine scholars' progress to date. We met as individual grade level teams to discuss student progress, gathering quantitative and qualitative data that equipped us to strategically plan how we could use the digital environment to support teaching and learning without the typical tools that are available in the classroom setting. We held vertical conversations between grade level teams to discuss the progress and to identify key areas that they may need to reinforce upon our return to school in the fall of 2020. The teachers were able to use this information along with our beginning of the year benchmarks to drive instruction for our scholars, to work towards filling in gaps. This is a continual process. In addition, our school improvement plan, we have included an academic goal that allows our teachers to utilize available technological resources to drive instruction in a more strategic manner. We will also use the Jumpstart Academies. As you may remember, last February, we had a Jumpstart Academy focused on literacy for grades 3 through 5. We anticipate having that same Jumpstart Academy again, focused on literacy and particularly in close reading to support students as they take the SBA. We also want to introduce a Jumpstart Academy in February focused on math instructional gaps. To ascertain data regarding parent engagement, we hosted special workshops for parents, sent personalized videos of support to our families and scholars, provided virtual play, concerts, virtual spirit days, and artistic whole school challenges, including a dance challenge to maintain family engagement. For our families, we are continuing to host parent workshops to support parents to assist their children when they're at home. Our literacy specialist led a workshop on establishing an appropriate reading diet for your child, which provided pointers for our parents. In addition, we partnered with the PTA and the Bruce Museum to hold a collaborative family workshop night that promoted fun ways to engage families within the arts. For our adult learners, we reimagined some of the work that we plan to do in the spring and the summer with the teachers. In lieu of the Teachers Summer Institute, we held a small teachers virtual institute focused on STEAM unit development. Our focus was student agency, inquiry, research, and self-directed learning. Moreover, we embedded professional learning into our monthly staff meetings using an answer is in the room approach. Each month, we host breakout sessions during staff meetings to personalize professional learning based on various professional learning needs of the staff, using the individual and collective strengths of the staff to address areas of needs as identified by them, helps to increase educational prowess of our staff and to build community. I am happy to report that our staff received glowing reviews from our PTA president and other parents regarding their children's remote school experience for the week that we operated in remote fashion in January, demonstrating that the support from the district, as well as the support of our teacher leaders in the building, galvanized us in a way that continues to strengthen who we are as a community of adult learners. Next slide, please. Slide 5, accomplishments. You'll see the question there, what if we made creativity and creation a part of what we do every day? So some of the things that we've accomplished so far: orchestrated STEAM design challenges for scholars. We also ascertained diverse engineers to share upcoming future challenges for our scholars, creating windows and mirror opportunities for them. As mentioned on slide 4, we reimagine our Summer Teachers Institute, plan Jumpstart Academy. We also developed a plan for increasing our STEAM magnet school dosage, developed a STEAM student agency inquiry-based magnet unit for our upper elementary school scholars. We participated in principal chats, but this time we're tag teaming with the PTA rather than just being led by the principals. I participated in collaborative STEAM conversations with the Greenwich Public Library and the Innovation Lab. Continued our arts partnership with the Youth Philharmonic Orchestra. The scholars are doing a great job virtually. And we coordinated a STEAM Student Advisory Board, and they have some awesome activities and ideas that I want to share with you in the upcoming slide. Next slide, please. Enhance. We will continue to strengthen our STEAM approach by investing in our scholars, the staff, and our families in a way that creates further connectedness to forge forward, striving for the biggest return on investment, whereby our Hamilton Avenue scholars exceed our expectations. It has been proven that magnet schools enrich scholars in ways that create a positive effect on the community at large. Vince Bertram said, STEAM is about nurturing scholars' curiosity and helping them develop creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking skills. STEM isn't simply the subjects in the acronym, and neither is STEAM. It's an engaging and exciting way of teaching and learning. The Magnet School of America reports that strong magnet schools are founded on 5 pillars: diversity, innovative curriculum and professional development, academic excellence, high quality instructional systems, and family and community partnerships. The synergistic relationship of these 5 equally held tenets is not merely a foundation, but a compass, moving our scholars forward to a well-prepared future where they can use their skills to curate, evaluate, and develop solutions to problems with evidence using higher order thinking and collaboration. Key areas that we're going to continue to focus on our magnet school relate to maximizing our magnet communication and marketing. So being able to work collaboratively with central office, making sure that when we reimagine and we rebrand Hamilton Avenue STEAM Magnet School, that we build upon all of the natural strengths that are already a part of our wonderful learning community, but also that we host virtual visits to high-performing STEAM Magnet schools to continuously learn. We also plan and lead ongoing intensive systematic STEAM professional learning for adult learners. As noted in the original report presented in 2014 and in scholarly research, professional learning is a key ingredient to the implementation of magnet school themes. Teachers in grades 3 to 5 have already participated in Socratic seminar, Professional Learning with Dr. Elliott, virtually, to support them with the STEAM unit implementation. Those sessions were conducted in November and January. Throughout the remainder of the year, professional learning will continue with classroom teachers with Dr. Todd White, and they will focus on maximizing student learning outcomes. Parent academies will continue to be held. One of our upcoming principal parent academies that I'm very excited about that we're partnering with the PTA relate to the parent perspective, partners in learning and STEAM. short-term goals that we have are to ensure that we work collaboratively with Sheila Saval and a consultant as it relates to the creation of the new STEAM magnet units during the spring, and to continue to inquire into and strengthen our teaching and learning practices. Long-term goals relate to really developing a culture of peer review of our STEAM lessons, an iterative process where we continually strengthen the work that we're doing every single day. That means that we have to identify supports, structures, and strategies that will enhance our programming. Developing STEAM partnerships. External partnerships broaden student learning opportunities inside and outside of the classroom. Community partners not only serve as excellent resources in developing the magnet theme, but they can become indispensable in implementing the theme, offering time, equipment, space, services, and money. Strengthening and cultivating STEAM partnerships to maximize academic success for our scholars is vital. The short-term goal is to work to strengthen our relationship with the Greenwich Public Library and the Innovation Lab. The long-term goal is to work to secure at least 2 additional partners to support implementation of our magnet school theme, in coordination with support from Sheila Saval and Laura Newell. Designing STEAM specialized program is one of the major pillars of the frameworks established by the Magnet Schools of America. And so we expect to do this with the strengthening of our magnet school theme with arts integration, increasing magnet school dosage with our dedicated STEAM block, and most importantly and most exciting thing that was created by conversations from teachers and students relates to Sheila Saval, was the planning and coordination of a challenge symposium, which will take place as a year-long endeavor next school year. We will start the planning for that in the spring, and we're excited for all that is to come. Long-term goals relate to the development of additional units, and also making sure that these units that we developed are student-centered. They recognize our students and our families' funds of knowledge. They allow them to experience autonomy and learning while using workplace and life skills, involving project-based learning, personalization, and focusing on a continuous improvement approach for the scholars' learning and for the teacher's instruction. Evaluating and continually improving iterations and revisions of the magnet units can be expected. Scholars experience expansive STEAM learning opportunities and frequent and varied enrichment experience outside the classroom and beyond the neighborhood. So our short-term goal is to develop an after program to begin next school year focused on STEAM-rich experiences. Many studies show a positive correlation between educational robotics and student achievement. It is our hope to bring the robotics elementary school club to our students next school year in the afters program. In addition, a math enrichment program for our scholars in the after school program, targeting grades 2 through 4 who are having difficulty mastering math concepts. In addition, we would like to bring in the element of dance. I have had initial conversations with Laura Newell, and I look forward to planning a launch of the afters program with the arts, given our parameters that may occur due to COVID. We will seek grant funding to support our robotics club and dance club. Studies show that when school children are allowed to stand and move, memory, attention, mood, and academic achievement will improve. Our long-term goals as it relates to this is how do we expand the in-school arts arms of STEAM throughout the school? It has been reported that Hamilton Avenue School is one of the elementary schools that has been one of the top feeders of string students into our high school. Our K-2 Suzuki program is very successful. Maintaining it is very important. Responsibility, executive functioning skills, all of those translate into high academic achievement. Enhancing the dance unit that is within the current PE curriculum, exploring and planning for possible virtual reality options, and looking into our computer arts as a possibility. At the high school level, we know that that is one of the courses, and we would like to create a viable pipeline of classes to the high school beginning at the elementary school level. Next slide, please. As a reminder to all families, the magnet school applications are due on February 5th. Thank you for your time.
All right, Shanta, thank you very much. So this is Peter Bernstein. I think, you know, I'm a former HAMAV PTA president. I just want to thank you so much for helping to bring stability. I know there's been a lot of turnover there, experienced it there myself. Your energy, your positive attitude, I think are going to be amazing. I'm really happy to hear about, you know, your discussion on building community with the students, with the teachers, with the parents. I expect great things, so I can't wait to hear a report from you in the future as to how these things are taking shape. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Ms. Hirsch.
I wanted to second Mr. Bernstein and just say thank you for the deep and in-depth presentation. I'm wondering if I'm too old to apply to the magnet program because it sounds absolutely fantastic. And more importantly, I just really wanted to commend you the fact that you did, needs assessment for the school and really are looking at ways to sort of bridge the academic divide. To bring arts into technology is huge. And I absolutely love that you are doing that and creating community amongst parents and students at the same time. So I really just wanted to just say thank you for the really in-depth and fantastic presentation. And you'll be getting my personal magnet application soon.
Thank you.
I'll be walking in on my knees, so look younger.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's all the, oh, Mr. Scher.
Peter, I was looking at the rest of our agenda plan, and normally we have a racial balance update. I don't recall seeing the data recently for this school and our other magnets. Is that planned, or is that something that we could get?
So I don't see it on the agenda plan, Peter, but certainly we can talk to the superintendent about getting that data and having that data shared. I don't think
Yeah,
that's,
because I mean, this
that's
is great.
just tied to this item.
What's that?
That's not specifically tied to this item.
Well, the entire purpose of the magnet program was to create this, to solve the racial balance problem at Hamilton Avenue. So I mean, it's great what they're doing. As you know, I don't believe in this idea of categorizing children by race in where they go to school. But hey, the state of Connecticut is the state of Connecticut. But as a result, I'd like to understand this program because that's the impetus for it. It's great what you're doing, independent of all this other nonsense from Hartford. And I just want to compliment you guys on what you're doing there. It's really great. And it's great to see that the program is actually advancing because it was stalled for a while there. So this is really great. But at the same time, you know, we live in this world where we have to deal with the results. And I'd love to know how we're doing on those results. I was surprised it wasn't included with this report, but if we could get that as a follow-up quickly, Tony, that would be great.
All right, not seeing any other hands. Peter, can't hear you, Peter. Lost your voice.
I was just wondering if I was hearing a confirmation that we're going to get that data.
As I said, we'll have a discussion with the superintendent and figure out the best way to get that to the board. All right, we're going to move on to our next item. Thank you very much, Shanta and Mark. Our next report is the ALP program report. So Mr. D'Amico and Ms. O'Regan.
Thank you, Chairman Bernstein. I'm pleased to kick off tonight's presentation on our ongoing efforts to improve and bolster the advanced learning program for the students of the Greenwich Public Schools. I'd like to thank Brian Paldunas for his comments, and I very much look forward to opening pathways for more parent partnership in future efforts for improvement in this program. I think it's sorely needed. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our ALP coordinator, Ms. Bonnie O'Regan.
Good evening. In October of 2020, the Advanced Learning Program reported to the board about the salient findings and recommendations from the external review of the program that was conducted by educational psychologists Drs. Christy Spears-Neumeister and Virginia Burney. The focus of that October report was on the areas of the most crucial for overall program improvement and the actions for future consideration to serve the needs of the advanced and gifted students in Greenwich. Board members commented in October that they were not surprised by the findings of the external report, that the comments and suggestions in there were things that they were aware of for years, yet the report was largely focused on the perceptions rather than the data. What you have before you is an update on that internal data analysis that's been done in response to the recommendations to the research and implementation of best practices for the equitable identification of students from all schools and demographic groups. Appendix B includes that full report from October for ease of reference. This does not mean that we have not, that the other recommendations are on hold. It's just that this is where we are right now. So first question that we were looking at was, to what was the extent that there is proportional representation among all demographic groups within the advanced classes? We looked at gender, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status in ALP level classes in the elementary school, once jump, twice jump math in the middle school, and ALP English in the middle school. Once and twice jump math is freshman, 113, 113A is freshman, and AP math and AP English at the high school. Representation indices are used to discuss equity within the field of gifted education. In the 2019 report, System Failure Access Denied, equity is defined as having a representation index, or an RI, of at least 0.80. An RI of a 1.0 indicates a perfect proportional representation. And we refer to the RIs greater than 1 as well represented rather than overrepresented. You have a lot of data within the report, but what I have here is a graphical representation of the representation indices for above level math, with elementary shown in blue, middle school shown in goldenrod, freshman in green, and AP in yellow. The red line indicates here's the red line, indicates the passing or the 0.80 mark. I listed a number of salient findings in regard to the representation indices. What the graphical representation shows, though, is that as we're looking at this, we can see that we have underrepresentation among our Hispanic low SES populations and our Black populations in above level math. When we look at above level English, we see the same trend occurring with underrepresentation of Hispanic and low SES and Black, and also among our Black students. When we look at our published selection procedures, you remember from October that when we look at the selections, we look at demonstrated high performance, and we also look at underdeveloped performance. Demonstrated high performance is indicated on our matrix of 15 out of 30 points. Underdeveloped performance is defined as any student who has factors that make placement and performance more complex. This includes students with advanced potential who have an additional exceptionality, who are culturally, linguistically diverse, or there's other considerations. Placement is then determined by a building advisory committee meeting through an analysis of the open-ended responses and examples of the characteristics and behaviors as defined. In the external review, it was reported that most students were placed in the ALP program with less than a combined total of 15 out of 30 points. This raises the question, well, what were the other determining factors used for placement within the ALP classes? The analysis of that same data that the reviewers used was completed. Looked at the students who qualified. This was the same numbers that they were looking at for that 15 out of 30. CUSP students, these were the students who scored the 14 points. Whether the exceptions were made during the building advisory committee meeting due to twice exceptionalities, local or building level norms being used, and teacher input, or if there was an exception made after the building advisory where there was an appeal data was used. When we look at this graphically, we can look at about 50% of the students in elementary math are placed with students at qualified or at the cusp. This is also true in elementary reading. You also note that about 30% are students that were placed using local norms. When we look at the middle school ALP English placement, we have a slightly greater number of local norms being used. One of the perceptions that was highlighted in the report was that a number of students were being placed through the appeals process. And you can see here, when we look at the students, is that there's actually less than 10%. The greatest amount are the students that are going into middle school that are placed during the appeals process. There is no magic bullet when it comes to solving the problem of inequity in gifted education. Lack of equity is caused by a number of factors. In the meantime, though, we can make significant progress by relying on a number of best practices. But as we look forward towards implementing the best practices for equitable identification, we need to start with the question, what is the purpose of the program and what does it serve? The suggestion is to upfront decide on what or who. Either you can start with a goal, as in more kids are being prepared for advanced level classes at the middle school and high school, and then find the kids who are most likely to benefit from that type of a program. Or it can start with a group of kids who seem under-challenged. Greenwich published program mission in the board policy is to teach students who give evidence of significantly higher performance capability when compared with other age, experience, environment, and specific academic fields, and who require services or activities not ordinarily provided by the school. So keeping that in mind, when we look at what the experts have to say, equity within the ALP program has been a long-standing concern. In the comprehensive review of the ALP program presented in 2012, an analysis of the ALP enrollment by subgroup indicated that Hispanic and low SES students were underrepresented in ALP classes. The information I presented tonight is an update of that baseline data. Best practice recommendations include using that data and to work out a plan to help mitigate the inequalities. Universal screening practices, when paired with a mechanism to identify promising students who miss baseline assessment cutoffs, test-based universal screening can be a basis for a streamlined and more equitable identification process. The use of building level norms continues to be one of the best practice recommendations. As Ulmer and Tyner state in the Fordham Institute study, since students tend to cluster in groups with other students from similar backgrounds, policies that identify students for services at the building level also tend to increase representation of typically underrepresented groups. Renzulli, Reese, and Smith talk about the use of multiple pathways for identification, in which about half the students test in the program and the other half enter by alternative pathways, including the use of teacher rating scales. Teachers are in a prime position to recognize talent in their classrooms. Teaching rater instruments have the potential as screening tools or additional pathways to identify students from low-income families. Recommendations from the National Center for Research on Gifted Education include the use of a talent pool list of students who exhibit potential but are not yet enrolled in gifted programs. As cited in the October review, Greenwich's commitment to the identification of all students, including those from underrepresented populations, is evident throughout the selection process, and best practices recommendations have been put into place. The Gifted Behaviors Continuum, along with the 12 Traits of Giftedness Scales, have been published in the Placement Procedures Handbook and are used during the Building Advisory Committee meeting discussions. To further increase the fidelity of the placement process, it has been recommended that the outplacement protocol include the quantification of that teacher input. Greenwich has defined district level norms for what demonstrated high performance it means with the use of the matrix. And in the 2012 review, the use of building level norms was defined as at least 5 students will be placed in each strand of the ALP in each building. The number of 5 represented approximately 10% of the smallest class size in the elementary schools at that time. When establishing the placement protocols for English 113A, the local norm was defined as approximately 100 students. Currently, middle school English placement defines local norms as approximately 40 students or 1 section of ALP English on each team. The publication of how these local norms are defined will improve that transparency of the placement protocols for advanced level courses. Before making final recommendations, I'd like to diverge back to data just for a moment. Although not specifically addressed in the evaluation report, an ongoing challenge within our most advanced math classes has been gender balance. An analysis of the number of roles in math showed that while there is an underrepresentation of females in elementary ALP math, females are proportionally represented in above level math classes in middle school and high school. In October, a statement was made that we need to identify the right students at the right time and help students be ready for the advanced level courses in middle school and high school. ALP is a tool, but not the only tool. The work done in collaboration with the STEM department has helped the district make progress in improving that equitable representation for girls in math. But there's still work that needs to be done to help more students develop their potential. The recommendation is to establish a program prior to formal identification procedures that provide students with learning opportunities to enhance knowledge and academic skills necessary for a student to be recognized. There are a number of programming models that have shown promise in mitigating underrepresentation, such as enrichment clusters, young scholars, Project U-Stars, or the scholar identity model. The proposal is to, with a board approval, establish a full representative committee to look at these models and create one that works for our community. As I quoted in the written report, to be most effective, education be situated in the local community, taking into account the local culture, resources, and values. The ALP program has been described as a jewel. We do have a good program, and I look forward to continued discussion about how we can reimagine and enhance what we offer for students in Greenwich.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. I guess board members, if you've got questions, please raise them up. All right, Ms. Kowalski, quick finger.
Sure. So thanks, Bonnie, for the report. I appreciate it. I guess I have two questions. So I guess what is the problem that could you say it in simple terms? What is the problem you're trying to solve with ALP? And what are you proposing, how you intend to solve it?
When we look at we're not proportionally equitably represented amongst among racial, within racial ethnicity. And we also, when we look at the girls being represented in elementary math, that we want equitable representation across the board. We've put in a number of practice since 2012. And in 2012, when we looked at the baseline data at that point in time, we found that we weren't even equitably offering the test to students. So we were not equitably identifying, but at the same time, students weren't even being asked to take the tests. And that's where we started using more of the universal screening procedures. And we have made progress, but not enough. So what I'd like to do is look at, even though we are using the local norms, which is best by and far the best practice recommendation across the board, and using universal screening procedures, there's more that needs to be done. And it needs to take the whole community. It's that ALP is a tool, but it's not the only tool in order to get these kids the skills that they need and those experiences that they need in order to develop that full potential. We want them to be ready to take those advanced classes when they get to the high school.
So I have a question then to that. I don't disagree with the current practice on how ALP, children are selected for the ALP program. My concern is if we continue to make modifications, do we run the risk of placing children in ALP, irrespective of race or gender, into ALP that aren't ready for ALP? And then by that, I mean, are you putting them in a class that they're not ready for academically, and therefore they're going to struggle and then do detriment to their education because they're not there yet, right? That we actually need to be doing something else to get them there. And two, you described the purpose of the program was to offer for significantly higher capable children that ability to advance in class. Does that then mean that those children are then being, they're not being taught at that higher level because then you have varying levels within ALP? In other words, are we lowering a standard to get in that somehow benefits some kids and hurts others?
When we're looking at the local norms, when we're defining the local norms at the building level, and we look at your top 10% within that building or the outliers within that building, what you're doing is you are looking at the students who have that equitable experience and providing them with what they need at that point in time. If there are outliers within that outlier group, then we are working with them as individuals, as we do now, is that we have gifted students within our ALP program that need additional programming beyond what we're offering within the ALP program.
So I guess,
or I should say the curriculum.
So is it, so I understand you're twice exceptional. So let's say, for example, a student actually shows a high tendency to solve math problems, but struggles in reading, but for all intensive purposes, really does deserve the advanced math, because if someone reads them the problems, that they get it, they can do it. In fact, they could probably do it in their head, right? So is that the type of additional support you'd be providing for a child and allowing that child to go into like an ALP math class? Because when they test on their own, they're not going to get in because they can't read the questions without help. Is it, or is it, so if that's yes, okay, then I can see that. Then the other question I have is, or is it the children that aren't just testing in either way to get? So for example, even if they are given the addition, it's not a reading issue. Are we lowering the standards for the actual math criteria or the science criteria to get in without the extra help? That's what I'm trying to understand. Like, where's the bar? And where are we lowering it? What additional help are we providing these kids? That's my concern, right? Or maybe I'm not articulating myself well. But what I'm trying to figure out is, if we're giving the kids, which you already answered yes to, that can do the math problems but just need the additional help in reading, great. Okay, I see where that's going. But my other question is it what if it's not the reading issue and they just aren't testing as high on the math component? Are we still, are we lowering that bar to allow them in?
But are they outliers within the building? Are they, when we go back to that definition, the mission statement within the board policy about not ordinarily provided by the school, if we're looking at what's going on within that classroom, and if they're outliers within that classroom, within that building, then there's going to, then do they need that level of differentiation within, beyond what was being offered within their classroom?
I guess
Are they going to need full 2 grade levels? Are they going to, or so I'm.
Here's my general concern. My general concern is, right, my general concern is that, right, what we're all, if it's divided by building, then that's a criteria that's looked at. But obviously, I want to make sure that every child in the district is getting the appropriate level of instruction and that they're all exceeding their maximum potential. I think everyone on this board would agree with that. My concern is we have an ALP program, and what is the purpose of, I guess I want to make sure that we're maintaining the purpose of our ALP program, and that every child that gets into ALP is being taught at that level that they, for the purposes that they're being in. For example, if they're testing 2 grades above in math and they're in ALP, that's great. But if a child is not testing 2 grades above in ALP and is at testing lower, but because they've met building norms, are they putting in, and how is that ALP class then conducted when you have a broad scale of talent there?
Right, because what you're looking at is back to that idea of, are we identifying students for a certain curriculum, and that, or are we identifying students and placing students based upon what, that they're outliers within their building and they need something more beyond what's being offered in that classroom, that level of differentiation that they need. And then once they're in, if they're needing that level of differentiation within, no matter which room they happen to be in, they're getting the correct level of instruction.
Well, that's my question. Is that program ALP, or is that program actually called something else? Right, in helping that other level of that level of, for that child at that particular level to succeed. I guess I'll leave it with this. Look, I think the worst thing that we can do to a particular child is to advance them into a program that they're not yet ready for, that makes them feel inadequate and less smart than their peers that are currently in that class, because we've thrown them into a class because we think that's the right thing to do, rather than addressing the needs that that child needs in order to help them excel from an individualized learning process. And so maybe what we're trying to do is, it's out by another name in order to make sure that we are adequately educating all children at the appropriate level.
We're looking at what you're proposing as levels of service.
Yeah, an individualized learning process, so that you're not, you're helping all students at the levels at which they need to be taught, rather than excelling a student that's not yet ready or holding back a student that's already there. That's my concern.
Right. And so what you're proposing is that levels of service. And I think that that's something that in the committee that I'm proposing with the board, is that I would like to really look into, do we need more than one? Right now we have a dichotomous, you're in ALP or you're not. And
yes.
What I'm asking the committee to do is look at, we need something else. We need another level there.
I don't disagree that we need another level, and I understand that at various schools, particularly at certain elementary schools, there are actually extra math. There's extra math help, and there are individual. I don't know particularly what they're called, but they're specific math instructors that go around and pull kids out, like they pull kids out for extra reading, they pull kids out for extra math. And maybe that's the answer there. But I'm just concerned that we are making the ALP program something more than we're making ALP into a program that it was never intended to be.
Miss Olson.
Hi, I just have a couple of questions. I'm glad you're looking at this Mark II with Bonnie, and I'm glad that we are now at a place looking at some inequities that have been there for quite some time. Sorry. So I have a question about we talked about the subjectivity of the placement process and the fidelity of the placement process, and I just want to be clear on a couple different points. So first of all, we're now accepting different scores, like different standards from different schools? And that's what you mean by the local norm. So, because I know that was like, that was sort of a hush for a while. I think there was a time, I'm gonna take my screen off and go in another room. So I'm still talking. I'm just not gonna have my video on at the moment. Okay. Sorry. So I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted to confirm that, because I know for a while they were saying, okay, it's the exact same sort of criteria at every different school. And that was what was said for a long time. But now we're saying that we do actually, I know Bonnie, you had told certain people, like at one particular elementary school, it's easier to get an ALP versus another particular elementary school, and had instructed families in that regard. So I just wanted to say that now we are actually kind of out with it. We're saying, okay, we are accepting different scores from different elementary schools. I think that's like refreshing to hear sort of the truth behind that. That's my first point. Is that correct?
Right, we just need to publish that.
Okay, yeah, so that's.
But I guess what I'd like to hear from the board is that, do we go with what was in the 2012 report at that number of 5, which represented that top 10%, or do we go with, or it was I think, or do we go with a percent? And how would you like to hear that published as to, okay, so we're going to take outliers within that building?
Right. Okay. So, and that's a discussion to have. I'm just happy to see the honesty and openness, because I haven't experienced that yet with this in regards to this program of my time on the board, that was actually stated at that was actually out there. I have another question just about, in terms of the subjectivity or the, fidelity of the placement process, and Mark, feel free to jump in too, but I do see the validity in teacher input, as I always talk about being a teacher, and I do see that as teachers being able to recognize talent. I do see the other side of it as well, where how do we include teacher input and like not have some sort of subjectivity? Like teachers are subjective, and I'm the first to admit that. So it's not an objective process when you're talking about teacher input. I know that there have been students told, like, well, this child doesn't really fit the behavior profile, or this isn't like a typical ALP student. And that, so I know that that's been told before. So how do you have how do you avoid the subjectivity when you're including teacher input? I don't know if that's quite possible.
Well, Bonnie, let me take that one.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think it is possible to remove complete subjectivity. I think a teacher who works with a student side by side all year develops a certain intimate relationship with that child. Now, when they come to the back meetings, what I was always listening for as a principal was, what were the characteristics and what are the artifacts that you could produce that shows that that child can demonstrate their skills in that content area? And even if it was just on grade level work, I'd want to see how quickly the child was able to ascertain the material. I'd want to look at a review of their scores on their assessments throughout the course of the year. And then there is a certain bit of instinct on the part of the teacher to say, this is someone who seems to stand out amongst the students in my class. And so you're right. I don't think there's a way fairly to say that you would remove all of the subjectivity, but I think the teachers do a really good job of representing the students in their class who they feel would be an appropriate match for the ALP program.
No, I can see that. One other quick question that relates more to this year, I guess, specifically. So I know, Mark, you had mentioned before that we opened up for the sake of cohorts, and Bonnie, I know it was one of the questions answered in your report as well. We opened up for the sake of the cohorting, like if you qualified for math, ALP in elementary school, you're now in science and reading, right? So, which to me seems a little bizarre because maybe you are really strong in math and reading, as Karen Kloska said earlier, maybe strong in math, but reading is a difficulty or vice versa. So what is that going to look like going forward now? Are the floodgates going to sort of stay open, or is there going to be some sort of, because from what I understand and what I've been told, once you're sort of in ALP, at least through elementary school, you have to have sort of parent approval to leave ALP. So I guess, can you just flesh that out for me, what that might look like? I do see some inequities in that process, but I also understand it was due to the cohorting process. Can you tell me what that might look like?
Those are great questions. And you're right, we do have to achieve a certain level set when we come out of COVID and we remove the cohorting strategy that we put in place this year. That said, I'm really excited about the opportunity here for us to think a little bit outside the box. So you put some students in position this year that they wouldn't have experienced because they didn't qualify traditionally, but they're experiencing the ALP curriculum for an entire year. And I'd be very curious, and I think it's very important data for us to look at to see whether or not that child was successful in that content area, whether they were able to keep up, stay on pace. And if they were successful, it begs the question, do we really need to test them to show that they can be successful in the program, or have they demonstrated that through their work this year? So that's something that we really need to grapple with and determine what we do with students coming out of COVID and the cohorting experience.
Mark, I just want to say too that I'm so glad that you are part of this process, because this is the first time I've seen really it going in a direction with, like sort of this, I'm very excited about the direction it's going, and I'm excited about, you know, the thought of change. My guess, and this is just my own prediction, is that I believe that many of those students that were put in ALP because of it being open will do quite well. I quite honestly believe that we should offer programs like this, like certain things, like a lot of these things should be opt-in, especially at the younger ages, in terms of a growth mindset, in terms of kids that are creating, you know, to see what they're capable of doing rather than limiting. You know, a truly gifted program is like 3%. This doesn't reflect that. This is much larger than that. So I like where this is going, and I appreciate you being part of this as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Hirsch.
Thanks. I know it's kind of no surprise that I'm a big supporter of the ALP program, and I think, you know, Karen sort of echoed one of my comments, you know, which was really same as I'd asked in October. What's the overall goal of our ALP program, and what should an advanced program be and look like? And I know that's something we all, I think, should really sort of consider its purpose. And I'd sent some of my questions over to you in advance, but I kind of noted in October that the report was based on a lot of survey data, and I really wanted to thank you so much for doing a bit of a deeper dive into the data. I asked one of the questions in October that I'd love to ask again. Have we done any long-term review of students who are placed in ALP in the elementary schools, and, you know, in anywhere in the grades 2 through 5, as well as those joining in the 6th through 8th grade, to see what level of classes they're taking in high school and how they compare to their peers in the non-advanced courses? For instance, if we segregated the data of students taking AP and honors in 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, and looked to see if those students entered the ALP program in early grades, in middle grades, or were not in the advanced program at all and are still accessing those programs. Because the question is we're looking at the end, we're looking towards an end result. I would sort of think that the goal is for students graduating GPS to ensure they've been educated to the highest levels of their academic achievement, supported and encouraged to reach and expand their potential, to be successful, and looking at students in sort of a holistic manner as opposed to percentages. So have we done that?
That has been done in the past. And I actually pulled the transcripts this morning to start that process, to look at that. But then we also have to remember that if the goal is that we are preparing those students to be successful and in those higher level classes, they shouldn't have to be in ALP in order to be in those classes.
Exactly.
The question is that then are we looking at that to make sure that the kids who are in ALP, that they're continuing on that same, that they are going into those classes, and how many students are there? I guess I want some clarification on what's the research question that I'm really asking, and what am I hoping to gain from that?
From my perspective, it's looking to see if for the students who are moving at a quicker level at the elementary age, because there is such a disparity in levels of engagement and educational levels in the early grades, right? Some students learn to read much sooner than others and have a better, conceptual math space than others. And they oftentimes normalize towards the middle school and then towards the high school. The question is if are those that are entering in elementary ALP are higher level classes in the high school more populated with students that had ALP as their background, or is it a median level and they are performing in the same manner that the students that did not have early access to ALP? Because it's the end result is that was what I'm trying to look at, is to see where these students are, not just about the entrance point, it's the exit point that matters as well. So if you've just pulled transcripts, I'd love to sort of see that data at some point, to sort of see, because if you see it, it's a middle range of 50% of kids that had ALP at some point versus 50% that have not, that are accessing the higher level courses in high school, then we've done our job. We're making sure that the students are getting what they need. So that's just question one. And I know you noted this before, the report had said that the ALP identification protocol had been established, but the data showed that for the majority of students, it wasn't being followed. So it does seem that those protocols need to be revised. So I appreciate that you've sort of taken a deep look into that. However, the key question I think we need answered prior to making the revisions is, why is it not being followed? Is the lack of fidelity and identification district-wide? Is it across all grades or only at certain schools and certain grades?
Yeah, and that data I didn't share because of the low N value when we looked at the building level, and that when we look at the use of the local norms, are there certain buildings that were using local norms because there would be no one that would qualify with that 15 out of 30 points?
Yeah, Bonnie, if I could just jump in, I think
Go
Karen,
ahead.
answer your question real directly. Yes, there's certain schools, certain grade levels, certain content areas where if you followed that threshold criteria, we wouldn't be able to field a class. And so by looking at local norms, you're able to then kind of shift and look at that top 10% within that grade level band in that content area and create a class.
So that kind of leads me to my next comment. I wanted to commend you for the recommendation and suggesting that we are looking to give more weight to the teacher input and recommendations, via rating scale or whatever. Their input is so exceptionally important. They spend so much time with these students and they truly know what a student is often capable of or what they really truly need within a classroom. So that is absolutely fantastic. And I really appreciate that you're you're adding that in as part of the criteria. But the data in the report shows that about 50% of the students in elementary ALP and 40% in advanced classes met the criteria or on the cusp, while at least 30% were placed via local norms. And I would keep talking about local norms, but I'd like to sort of understand exactly what those local norms are. Like what is the criteria that falls under that designation? Are we looking to identify students who reflect high levels of accomplished compared to other students in their school environment? Or are we looking to do that across the district? So the criteria is different per school, is what you're saying.
It's a true local norm specific to that school, that particular grade level, that set of students.
So the norms are going to be different for every single school is what you're trying to tell me. The criteria and the norms will be different?
When you're looking for alternative pathways to placement outside of the established criteria, then that's the route that you would take, and that's when you would employ the local norms.
Okay, because I was saying the data shows that about 50% come from the building advisory committee, and a large percentage of that is local norms. Okay. And then, I have a few others, but one question I'll ask specifically is, how are we planning to test students for placement next year? I know we didn't finish testing last year. Karen pointed out exactly what I had said in an earlier meeting, that a lot of students were placed in multiple strands this year. And I think it's going to be exceptionally interesting to see how well they do, being given opportunities that weren't there before. I think will be wonderful. But I also want to make sure that we're considering the fact that, there are gaps in district-wide standardized testing from the spring. We've dealt with the COVID slide effect and other factors. So I didn't know if you guys were going to push the date of testing for this year back to ensure some consistency in placement. I know I've had a lot of parents reach out with concerns as to placement and testing for next year.
Karen, certainly closing out testing that is still open is a priority for us, and Bonnie is slating March and April to close out any open testing. That said, I think the greater challenge is in finding spaces to test large groups of students in the spring, and we're working on different scenarios of how we could do that. And also an additional wrinkle to that is for students in the remote school and students whose families may not feel comfortable having them come to a site location. So we're still trying to develop different opportunities for that testing to occur. But Bonnie, I'll let you speak in more specifics.
Dates or that we're working out those protocols, it will happen. And what I work from is that we need to be finished with the entire process before school's out. So I have to work backward from there. And I'll push it as far as I can from the end date of school.
Well, it sounds already like you guys are going to be doing it slightly later this year, just because you're trying to revise the process. That was really that's right. Great.
And that the adjustments that are being made is that I'm reading the studies that are coming out of the NWEA map and those studies about what the effect has been of COVID on those test scores on a national level and adjusting accordingly.
Oh, good. Okay, that's
we're
great.
Looking at those scoring protocols,
that's
and looking at those, and that's also important for us to think about when we're looking at our own norms. And
I know we were just talking about some groups being underrepresented. So for specifically at students at the elementary level, are any of them being placements or screener tests? If English is not their native language, are they been given any of the tests in their native language? Have we considered that?
If the student needs to have the test translated, for instance, we've had students where we do the math problem solving assessment, where a student whose first language is Japanese, we've translated into Japanese for them. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I know that if
or we work with the ELL teacher in order to have that on-demand translation.
Ryan, sorry, my former ALP student, now high school
Say
senior.
hi, Ryan.
Bonnie says hi. Anyway, that's good to know, because I was going to say, especially at the younger elementary ages, if you have students that English isn't their first language, especially trying to translate word problems for math, it makes it that much harder. So I greatly appreciate hearing that we do work with translating some of this. That's great.
Yes.
All right, we'll transition over to Mr. Scher.
Thank you. Bonnie, I thought I had a grip on this, but I realize now I don't. So I need to back up to some basic questions. I don't understand this thing of local norm equaling a certain number of students. You said that from 2012. What does that mean?
Oh,
Bonnie, do you hear me?
so, yes, I'm processing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so,
Process
so
away.
when we're talking about local norms, it's usually a certain percentage that you set of, say, we're going to take the top 10% of the students in the building. So if you have 40 students in second
Okay.
grade.
Oh, I got it. I'm good.
Okay.
The mission is evidence of high performance capability. What is high
That's what's in the
performance?
board policy.
What is the definition of high performance capability?
That's how we defined it, as the 15 out of the 30 points when we look at those three measures of using the ability, the achievement, and the performance tests.
Yeah, no, I understand how you measure it, but what is it? I understand how you measure it, but what's the simple description of high performance capability? A high performance capability to do what?
Well, within math, as we've defined it, we're looking at specific academics within math, within reading, language arts, and science, now that we get to do science again.
I'm sorry, let me ask the question a different way because I'm not being clear.
Okay.
High performance capability means what? They can learn at a higher rate. They can learn advanced concepts versus their peers in their age group, in their grade group. What does that mean, high performance capability?
Let me think on that one.
Okay.
Let me just process that, because I don't want to misspeak, and I want to define it succinctly for you.
And I'm just trying to understand the building blocks here. So I'm sorry, these questions are a little all over the lot, because I'm trying to understand the building blocks, because the building blocks go together in a system, and I'm trying to understand the building blocks. You talk about an equity model at a correlation, an R2, actually, which that's not how that correlation is done. I don't think we've used the math the right way in a regression, but I'm trying to understand this 0.8. Where does that come from as equaling equity? Where did you get that?
I got that from the report that was the report about equity within the gifted education.
Okay. What the report that we got ourselves, or it's from like
another report? I can.
Okay.
I linked it in the resources to the actual PDF if you want to look at that.
Okay.
In the resources, it's the Gentry.
That's really helpful. Okay.
Right. So you'll see that where you can catch that PDF. And I believe that you were CC'd on the questions that Brian and Mimi had sent me earlier, and I hyperlinked it in that document.
Yeah, did those come
when
today?
they asked about that representation indices.
Did those come today? The answers to the question for Brian and Mimi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around noon today.
yeah, with all due respect, stuff we get the day of, we need more time to digest. But anyway, I'm really concerned about this program. And I'm concerned about what I'm hearing tonight. I'm hearing, and maybe this is just, again, I've been at this a while in Greenwich Public Schools. I feel like we're proposing to adjust this program, which is a successful program, to solve other problems we have in the district that this program are not the best place to solve. And I'm really concerned that we've looked at this in isolation and not in the overall context of what we're trying to accomplish. And that I'm not hearing consistency of thinking in this program itself. And I'm not hearing consistency of thinking of this program in a landscape of educational resources and programs to deliver what we're trying to deliver to students. And I know I raised these questions the last time, which was, I guess, in October, maybe September, something like that. And I appreciate you trying to answer them. I really do. But I think this takes a lot more thinking. And I tend to agree now. Now I understand what the PTAC was saying in their report, that it almost opens more questions, and this requires some more thinking before we go to implementation. And let me tell you where I'm kind of stuck. We, like it or not, we have a Greenwich curriculum, and it's aligned by grade. That's the system that we have. The entire purpose of the strategy, which we have not executed in the last 5 years. I didn't want to get into this in the strategy report because it's a little bit depressing. The whole purpose was to move away from this rigid model and develop an educational model that was much more flexible and much more mastery based and delivered to students what they need based on their individual situation. The problem with the curriculum that is strictly grade-based, and the problem with a system that only is binary, particularly at the elementary level. Fortunately, at the middle school, it becomes less binary. At the high school, the system is very flexible. But at the elementary school, it's ridiculously rigid. You either are in the regular classroom or you're in the ALP program, okay? And we need to move away to a program that is much more flexible than just two options, all right? And the program is designed today to say, if you are capable in ALP of being taught the curriculum at the next grade level, we have a program for you. The ALP program is not designed at all to be able to do the way you've defined local norm. Local norm is saying, I'm going to have a fixed percentage of kids that I'm going to identify as a fixed percentage, 20%, is the number that's been bandied about. And I'm going to figure out what those kids need to be able to be served. Now, if you put that in a school where everybody's at grade level and there's a 20% that can go above grade level, and you can put them at the next grade with an ALP class and well-defined curriculum, that works perfectly. If you stick that in a school where everybody's half a grade behind, we don't have an ALP curriculum that says, oh, accelerate on the half of this year of third grade and the next half of fourth grade. We're not we're not structured to be able to do that. Now, I'm not suggesting it's not a good goal, but the real problem that we're not solving, and I've seen it in the 12 years I've been on the board, it's my great frustration. It's one of the things I feel like is my great failure. And I'm sure Peter Bernstein, who's been here for 8 years, feels exactly the same way, which is we have a lot of students that are not at grade level. And by the way, taking all this race and gender stuff out, I don't like to talk about it that way because I don't think we should think about kids in stigmatizing them in groups. More than half of them are white. So if you want to go down this little racial track, we need to be very careful. I want to focus on the student. And the problem that we've got is that we have an achievement gap. We have kids not at standard, regardless of their racial group. And we're not solving that problem by the time they hit ALP, which is grade 3. And that's the real problem that we have to solve. And we have not been able to solve that. So to try to take ALP and twist a very successful program back to solving that problem, I don't think we need to get focused on an achievement gap that we've never solved. I appreciate that you want another committee. This will be like the 5th or 6th committee in my time on the board trying to get at this problem. I've come to the conclusion we don't know how to solve this problem internally with the people that we've got. Doesn't mean they're not excellent teachers. It's a super hard national problem. I think we need to get some more outside help. I've always been worried about the rigidity of the system. I used to have many conversations with every superintendent that came before Tony Jones. And I always wanted to understand why at New Lebanon are we teaching the identical curriculum in the identical way that we're teaching pedagogy that we're teaching at Riverside? Why are we not adapting to the unique needs of these groups of students in the schools that they're in? We've gotten ourselves to a place where at New Lebanon, per student, we are resourced more than 2 times in terms of teaching resources than we are at Riverside. And I don't have a problem with that. But this problem doesn't get solved by lowering standards to match a particular racial profile we want. And it doesn't get solved by just throwing more resources at this. We've got to move to take best practices that are much more innovative, and we really have to get to the root cause. The problem with these kids not getting in this program, if you're using universal screening, which I'm pleased to hear because that was one of my questions, and you're using consistent standards and they're not getting in the program, that problem started in preschool K1 and 2. We need to go solve that problem at its root so that more kids are getting into this program. We're not going to solve that real problem by adjusting standards or making the process more subjective. I spent this week, Bonnie, when I saw your report, because I care about this, I went and did a lot of research out of Stanford School of Education, reading out of Johns Hopkins. You know as well as I do, Johns Hopkins is the Harvard of this subject. And we've kind of pick and choose from the research in this, and it's an integrated system. It says absolutely, you have to be using universal screeners. You have to screen everybody, okay? And I'm not so sure that we're doing that. I'm wondering, and they say that should be the lead thing you should do. The other thing they say very carefully is you should take in other factors, but they strongly underline that teachers there needs to be a really strong methodology of evaluation. and it needs to be trained to every teacher who's going to participate in the evaluation. So it's implemented with tremendous fidelity. This is the exact problem we had in special education, which is we had all kinds of different teachers with all different kinds of skill set making recommendations. So I think we do need to look multidimensionally at a student. But if we just kind of unleash that on teachers who are not trained, we're going to really wind up in a bad place with this program. This thing is a gem of a program. It is widely recognized and known by parents who are looking to come to Greenwich. We've got to be very careful when we start monkeying with this program. And I'm really concerned that I appreciate that you guys, and I give you strong credit, backing for opening the aperture. And some of this is like touching the third rail. You know, there's some parents who are, you know, identification, my kid didn't get in. And I mean, I can understand all the politics of it, of why nobody would want to touch it. And I really appreciate the bravery of you and Mark and others to really be critical and thoughtful about it. It's brave, and it's what we need in the school system to make it better. But I think we need to think about some of these things a lot more than we already have before we move on to making substantive changes to the program. I'm not talking studying this for a year. I'm thinking concentrated in months, but I would be strongly against just implementing the recommendations as they are right now, with the data that's before us right now, with the thinking that's before us right now. I think there's some really great ideas, but we need to pull on the string a little more and do a little bit more discovery, because I'm really worried we're not going to solve the real problems that we have, which are more fundamental and much bigger than ALP. And we're going to wind up hurting one of our most successful programs, not through intent, but inadvertently, if we're not really careful here.
All right, Ms. Downey.
A number of points that I was going to make have already been made, so I'm not going to be redundant. But one I wanted to follow up on that Peter just made and that Megan pointed out was about the teacher input, subjectivity, objectivity, consistency, and that I do think teachers aren't really trained, right? They don't have a rubric, or do they, Bonnie, about like when they're giving the teacher input? They do. Okay. And do you feel that
I can forward you that on that.
No, I
to
just
you.
wanted to be, I just trust you if you tell me it's done. I just want to be sure that we have consistency from teacher to teacher, both within a building and across buildings, in the criteria that they're using when they make their recommendations. Okay, that's a good, I'm happy to hear that. My other question is, because we have the testing and it gets to the 15 and everyone at the cusp with a 14 seems to get in, right? So does it mean that maybe the testing number should be 14? I'm asking, right? Like, I mean, so
it should be, yeah.
Right, so then that's, then does our cusp become people with 13? That just kind of jumps out. Because if we're letting everybody in who's got the 14, we've already kind of made it that's the cutoff. So
yeah.
Anyway, but my other points have all been asked by people, but thank you. There's a lot of information.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
So, okay, yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of people took a lot of time. So a lot of things have been asked. I want to just take a step back for a second. First of all, this is a great program, and I know it personally, and I know it from just being in the school system for a long time. And we should note that we are lucky to have this program in Greenwich, right? Because all Connecticut says that you have to do is identify children that are gifted. And we actually have a program that tries to service that group. So, and what I've always understood it to be, Bonnie, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're supposed to be sort of 2 grade levels ahead. And I don't know if that's still the case or if that's the case everywhere, but I can say that I even know that teachers within ALP, because if we talk about personalized learning, differentiate the children within the ALP program, because it's never one size like fits all. And so I know that teachers have been really creative even within that, because whether the number be 10% or 20%, obviously there are still different skill sets within that group. The next question I have, and maybe it's why you see there's sort of the numbers move up, right? As you have an elementary school, there's always been fewer kids in the ALP program than middle school. Is it because the numbers are different, right? Like the 15 out of 30 scenario really only applies to elementary. And then as I seem to recall, with middle school, it's based just on STAR for math, and for reading, it's based on, I think, a writing sample, but it's a different scale. So is that part of the reason that things sort of open up, if you will, between elementary school and middle school?
For the math placement from 5th to 6th,
yeah,
is on teacher input and STAR, and I'm not in overseeing that, but that there's a number of different components. It is not the same type of protocol that we use for the ALP. The ALP
in elementary school.
In the elementary, it's not right. It's a different type of a system that we use.
And language arts is the same sort of thing.
And
right?
language arts, we use from 5th to 6th, we use the exact same system as we've used in going into the reading classes. However, at the middle school, because of teaming at the in the middle school model, is that we do place so that you have 2 sections of ALP English in the building.
So
If
Bonnie,
there are more than,
if I could just jump
go
in.
ahead.
So I think Kathleen, just to answer your question, at the middle school level, you're right, it opens up, there's more flexibility. And speaking to the 3 gentlemen who run our middle schools, they do have more resources than we do at the elementary level. So they're able to push kids forward and provide support at a different time during the day because they have that type of schedule. So is that helpful to you?
It does. And I mean, it sort of explains how the numbers go this way. And then it kind of gets to Karen's point, right? Kersha asked at the beginning, like, you know, let's work backwards, right? And see who ends up sort of in the AP classes. And then, I mean, even tonight, I mean, one of the things we talked about in this high school guide, right, was that you were changing sort of the leveling even for the English program, right? The sequencing. And part of the reasoning was that you maybe don't need certain prerequisites anymore. And so if we look backwards, you know, are we making sure that we're, you know, are kids ready, and are they ready at the right time? And, you know, we have to sort of probably work back from high school. With that, one more question, and then I'll go. And I know there's been a lot of focus on the teacher recommendations, which to me seems like a good thing, but the teachers have already had input just at the building advisory committee level. You're now suggesting that it's going to come earlier, so it becomes a part of the point system. Is that what you're saying?
No, let me clarify. What my intention is moving forward, and this is going to be discussed at the 5th to 6th grade parent meeting next week in specific. I really want to message out to families that we are moving STAR down in terms of the level of priority for placement, and that in speaking again with the 3 middle school principals and in looking at the way they have fielded their classes over the last few years, they really feel compelled that if a 5th grade teacher sees a student who has a real zest for a particular content area and a very strong work ethic and has been successful, that they want to elevate those students. I think, you know, Peter talks about it all the time. We're trying not to have the floor as our target. We're trying to have the ceiling be the achievable goal for more students. And by elevating students through the conversation, not necessarily by the criteria, we are able to do that at the middle school level. And I think what the three middle school principals are doing in terms of providing the added support at different times during the day, knowing that, yeah, we're taking a risk with moving some of these students up, but we're going to provide them with the support so that they don't fail. So I think it's, again, it's thinking outside the box. It's being more creative in the way we are approaching the assignments. It's being more flexible. And truthfully, I'd like to see a program evolve over the years that's much more responsive to student progress year in and year out versus just the set periods of time when we can place a student into a particular course.
100%. Look, this is a great program. I think there's a lot of great things that you always need to improve on. And it's important that we're taking a step back and thinking about it. And Mark, it seems like you're kind of coming at it with a fresh set of eyes. But Bonnie, I really appreciate all you're thinking about here. I know this is a tough set of questions, but thanks very much.
Before I go back to people that have already spoken, it's Peter Bernstein. Mark, you were just talking about, the additive support in middle school. As I was hearing the conversation earlier about, local norms and making sure kids are ready. In elementary school, I mean, how do we bridge that gap, right? Those kids that are on the cusp or with a little extra work and motivation can basically get them to where they need to be successful in the program.
Peter, that's a great question. And to me, really, when I'm trying to take in everyone's comments tonight, and one common thread seems to be coming across that we haven't talked about yet. I think it's important to note that when students enter into the ALT program at the elementary level, and I'm just going to use third grade math as an example, all of the third grade students that qualify for ALT math aren't entering in with the same level of skills in mathematics. There is a variation. And so it does require for the teacher to differentiate the instruction to meet the needs of the individual learners. So it's not a pure homogeneous class in the ALP environment. It is, in some sense, a range. And so the responsibility really falls back onto the teacher to provide that level of support.
So I understand that, Mark, but I'm more concerned with the kids who aren't getting the 14s on Bonnie's scale, that aren't making it into the class and getting that, and are in a classroom basically not getting enough differentiated support, or with a little bit more could be highly successful in the ALP program.
So Peter, with regards to that, I think we've taken a very important first step, but I think it's minimal and we need to examine other ways of providing additional support. But having placed math interventionists at the elementary school is a positive first step in recognizing additional math support for students that you're talking about here.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
I wanted to go on a slightly different side note. One of the other questions, that I had asked, or I wanted to ask, was in October. The October report was divided into 6 key areas. I know this report tonight really seems to be focused specifically on one area and improvements in that one area, on equity and inclusion in the program. But my question is, is not just about identification and equity of inclusion. Are you going to be looking, when we're kind of taking a look at this, to address the other areas, such as revising some of the ALP curriculum, especially, we're looking at science at the middle school, which was oversubscribed in, addressing the social emotional experiences and issues facing some of these gifted students that we have, as well as creating more professional learning and support for advanced learning for our educators?
Yes, those things are still on tap. This just focused in on that. The first things that we needed to address was the identification, but you'll see the full schedule in the Appendix A of the original report, which is in Appendix A of the original report that you have. You'll see the full schedule of when all of the rest of that is scheduled to be done.
I was just going to say, because it's a very full document. October's report was also very full, and I appreciate that you guys are sort of taking a deep dive. It's an incredible program, and I just would like to see it serving the students, in the best way possible. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Sher, let's see if we can wrap this up. We've been on it over an hour.
Can't think of anything more important to spend an hour on, more important than other things. I listened to what Ms. Stowe said, and I think we're missing something, and I want to put it out there as a objective. The reason that the middle school works and the reason that the high school works is two reasons. First of all, there's more options for kids. That's part one. And part two is parents get much more of a say in where their kids gets placed. That happens at the middle school, and it really happens at the high school, and that's why it works. And you can actually see it. I have 3 kids. 2 of them I've finished through Greenwich High School, and one of them is in their 10th grade year. 2 of my kids were not in ALP. They went to North Miami School, one of the highest performing elementary schools, so they had that benefit. But they were not ALP. By the time they got around to the high school, number of APs they take, they're on track with my son, who was ALP and went on and got more APs than I can think of. He got a full AP, so he's a full year ahead in college. Go figure. The point of it is that, and by the time my daughter got around, we didn't put either of them in 113A. We didn't put our ALP student in 113A in 9th grade. It's just more work. And they've thrived beautifully. They got off the chart scores in SATs. So I think this idea that if you're not in ALP, you won't get there. There's lots of evidence. I'm just looking at my own kids, and I'm looking at other people's kids who I know. And you don't have to be in ALP to get to this level of performance at the high school. There's a lot of other factors that go into it. The other thing is, in terms of placement, my daughter, non-ALP, came out of North Miami, was recommended for double jump math. We backed her down because it was stressing her out. Not that she couldn't do it, it was stressing her out. That was a parental decision that we made that was different than what the school, but the system was flexible enough that we could make that decision, and she had an option that put her in the right place. The reason I'm saying this is we got to focus on 2 problems, and it's particularly acute in math. We don't have the level of gradation and optionality and mobility that we have at the middle school and the high school in elementary schools. And we got to figure out with the administration how to get more options than just 1 or 2. I've been on this board 12 years. We talked about differentiation in the classroom. We're asking elementary school teachers to be jack of everything, and it's not fair to them. We need to look at educational strategies, maybe going back to teaming with a math specialized elementary teacher paired with one that's more oriented in the language arts to raise our performance and give more varied options other than just binary ALP yes or no for a student. It's what you're talking about, Mark, but we really need to do it in, Ralph said, I don't like grouping or tracking. Guess what, folks? Parents love grouping. They don't like tracking. They like grouping. That's what ALP tells you. They want their kids and they want optionality. We got to really solve that problem. And it's not just the ALP program. And I'm glad this conversation opens the aperture to talk about this. And how do we improve elementary education in our core subjects? The other thing we have to do is we have got to figure out grade preschool, the public preschool, because a lot of these kids are in these underrepresented minority groups. We're educating because they're in our preschool. And we have got to think, what are we doing in kindergarten and grade 1 so that more of these children are, quote, testing into the program? We need to create the problem in these schools where, not through lowering standards and local norms and what have you, we've got 20% of our kids in these minority or low SES schools where they're automatically testing in to the program at the same rate they would at, I don't know, North Street or Riverside. I don't know which school. We've got to figure out how to solve the problem before it rolls around to the first ALP test in the middle of second grade. And, you know, Barbara O'Neill was so helpful. She was a champion of early literacy. She was like a broken record with that. And we need to be. But we also need to be a broken record for all the other skills that are necessary so that we get more kids automatically testing in. We need to focus on those two problems, providing more optionality in the elementary school, like we have in the other two levels of the school system. And we need to work on solving the problem of the achievement gap so more students automatically test in. And I would just implore the board to think about those two ideas, make those part of our cause, and direct the administration to make it their cause, their focus, and support them as much as we can towards those goals. And I think, Peter, we need to talk about this again soon, and put it on the board agenda again soon, so we keep the momentum. This, to me, is one of the most important things the board could work on. No offense to you, Mr. Kelly. For me, this is way more important than stadiums and science rooms, and I want those, but I would much rather be spending our time supporting the administration, because these are the things that are going to make a difference for students. This is where the rubber meets the road. End of diatribe.